Chapter 296. Beside Ling'er was Chi Yu's old acquaintance, the fallen angel Lucifer. The others were all super experts of hell. Although they were far away, Chi Yu could still determine that they were at least at the six-winged level based on his mental strength. He knew 3 of them. They were the dreadlords that he had fought in the Covenant of Darkness. In the infernal world, they could display 100% of their strength. Such a powerful camp could indeed cause a devastating blow to the powerhouses on Earth. Under the influence of the provenance of nature, his mind power condensed into the shape of a needle and carefully probed Ling'er. From Ling'er's expression, Chi Yu understood many things. He suddenly realized that Ling'er had occupied a very important place in his heart. As he recalled the past, Chi Yu's blood began to boil. She is my woman. How can I allow her to marry someone else? No matter what, today's matchmaking must be ruined. With a cold flash, Chi Yu made up his mind. Ling'er stared blankly at the scene in front of her. The sea of cheers was nothing more than noise to her. She thought to herself, Chi Yu, oh Chi Yu, just where are you? I lied to my father and didn't tell him that you had come to hell. Where are you? Save me. Even if we have to elope, I am willing to leave with you. My father wants absolute power. He doesn't care about my happiness anymore. Now I can only fight for it myself. Chi Yu, just as she thought of this, suddenly, a familiar feeling hit her. Ling'er's pupils suddenly shrank. Her lifeless eyes suddenly became fierce. Her gaze instantly locked in one direction in the huge crowd. She saw a pair of eyes. A pair of very familiar black eyes. Although it was only a flash in the huge crowd, Ling'er was overjoyed. He's here. He's really here. Her originally cold and sad heart was instantly lit up with a new flame. Her hope had finally become a reality. But at this moment, Ling'er suddenly became nervous after the excitement. He's here. What will he do? If he comes into conflict with my father, there was no way he could escape unscathed. After all, almost all of the most powerful forces in the infernal realm were gathered here. But he was only one person. Chi Yu used his spiritual power to inform Ling'er that he was here and immediately disappeared into the crowd. This was because when Ling'er looked at him, Satan's gaze also followed. Satan's sensitivity to spiritual power was much stronger than Chi Yu had expected. No wonder he was the strongest person in the entire hell realm. The purple sun enveloped the earth. In this core of hell with the Demon King's castle as the center, everywhere was filled with an austere atmosphere. Looking at the noisy scene in front of him, Satan's ice-cold gaze became a bit more bloodthirsty and excited. In the near future, such a scene would definitely appear on Earth. At that time, he would become the true ruler of Earth. Thinking of this, the reluctance he felt because of his daughter's anger disappeared instantly. He would never allow anything to stop him from moving forward. Ling'er was his only daughter. No matter what, she must stay by his side and be under his control. Thinking of this, Satan slowly raised his hands. A layer of dark red light was suddenly released, and a huge energy fluctuation almost instantly spread to every corner of the square. The purple sun in the sky suddenly shot down a huge purple light, completely enveloping Satan's body. Under the cover of the purple sun, the great demon king of hell suddenly shocked everyone. The noise disappeared, and the square with hundreds of thousands of people became silent at this time. The eyes of every hell creature were focused on Satan, and the light in their eyes turned into fear and worship. Strength. This was the strength of the great demon king. Everyone felt as though they couldn't breathe. Under the increasing pressure, they became more and more nervous. What was His Majesty the Demon King trying to do? Wasn't he here to find a husband? The burning energy fluctuation on Satan's body became more and more intense. The light of the purple sun completely enveloped his body, causing the layer of black air around his body to gradually disappear. At this time, Chi Yu saw Satan's true appearance. Compared to Sanao, he was a bit more dignified, and the evil aura wasn't strong. However, His gaze alone brought Chi-Yu a huge pressure, which was something that Sana couldn't do. Although it was only a difference of 2 wings, the difference between Sana and Satan was like heaven and earth. At this time, Chi-Yu had some doubts about his own plan. Even if he released Sana and the hell creatures in the Demon Canyon, could they compete with Satan, or even pose a real threat to Satan? According to Chi-Yu's own judgment, the answer was very difficult. The power that Satan controlled was really too strong. Sana had been imprisoned for God knows how many years, and under so many years of rule, Satan's power had long spread to every corner of hell. The hell creatures weren't just afraid of him, they also worshipped him blindly, and this kind of worshipping was the most terrifying. As Chi-Yu pondered, the black generals beside him quickly fell down one by one. Their eyes were only filled with reverence and fear. Under the huge pressure, they finally couldn't bear it anymore and sat down on the ground one by one. Speaking of which, it was strange. As long as the black generals sat down on the ground, they would immediately feel the pressure. However, it was impossible for them to stand up again, because the moment they stood up, they would immediately feel the huge pressure appear again. Most of the black generals didn't understand what was going on, but Chi-Yu understood very well. It was because he understood that he now had a bit more admiration for Satan. Satan's control over his own energy could be said to be amazing. He could actually maintain the pressure emitted by his body at a position of more than 1.2 meters above the ground. In other words, the pressure in the air was divided into layers. There wasn't the slightest bit of pressure from energy, but above 1.2 meters there was a huge pressure. This way, the black generals wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure. The black generals wouldn't be hurt, they just needed to sit down. Chi-Yu knew that he couldn't control such a large area of energy. Although Satan also had the help of the purple sun in the sky, in this hell world, he was probably the only one who could borrow the power of the purple sun. Chi-Yu was very doubtful. If Satan was on Earth, would he still be able to maintain this kind of strength? However, at least from the current situation, he definitely wasn't Satan's match. Chi-Yu smiled faintly as a trace of light appeared in his eyes. In front of Satan's pressure, although he wasn't really affected, he very naturally revealed a pained expression. Like the other black generals around him, he pretended to be struggling to hold on. The huge pressure lasted for a full 5 minutes before stopping. At this time, only 1/50th of the black generals could still stand. There was no need for Satan to give the order. The Burning Legion had already moved. This was a test. If they couldn't even withstand Satan's pressure on such a large area, they would obviously be eliminated. It wasn't that easy to become Satan's son-in-law. At the very least, they had to have a certain level of strength. Under the supervision of the Burning Legion, the black generals who had been overwhelmed by the pressure left one by one with their tails between their legs. After waiting for half a day, all they got in exchange was to accompany the Crown Prince in reading. When most of the black generals returned to the core circle of hell, the entire plaza was already a lot more spacious. At this moment, the majority of those who could remain were those from the black general tribe who had wings. Even those who didn't have wings. Even those without wings had already reached a certain level of strength. In order to not attract attention, Chi-Yu also released his pair of Kirin wings. A 2-winged black general clansman. He wouldn't attract attention, right? Satan looked at the people in the plaza with satisfaction. There were still thousands of people in the plaza, and the black generals of the Burning Legion had already been separated out. Those of suitable age stood together with the remaining black generals. Satan's voice sounded. To be able to withstand the pressure I bring proves that you have a certain level of strength. However, this is still far from enough. If you want to become a true expert, you will need to put in a lot of effort. Before Ling'er chooses her son-in-law, you must prove to me that you have enough strength. From now on, I need you to engage in a real battle, a battle between yourselves. No one is allowed to join hands and fight as an individual unit. There is no need to unleash a fatal attack. Whoever can first obtain the ears of 3 others will be able to advance to the next round. Also, you must ensure that your ears are intact. I don't want my son-in-law to have no ears. Alright, begin. Satan's words were short, but his simple instructions brought about a bloody storm in the plaza. Under the temptation of power and beauty, no one would easily let go. Almost at the instant Satan said the word, begin, all the black general clansmen moved, surging dark energy chaotically appearing among the black general clansmen. At this time, there were no friends to speak of. Everyone around them was their enemy. The real battle had begun. Hearing Satan's words, Chi-Yu couldn't help but feel shocked. This Lord of Hell's method of choosing a son-in-law was indeed perverse. He actually made his subordinates kill each other. Although it was only cutting off their ears, how many people could pass this hurdle? The chaotic battle began. Those winged black general clansmen pounced on those who had no ears. They had to pick the soft ones. These black general clansmen with a certain level of strength didn't want to be eliminated before the real prince consort selection had even begun. At the same time, they wanted to preserve more of their strength. The chaotic battle was fierce. Almost in an instant, hundreds of ears were separated from their owners' bodies. Chi-Yu couldn't be bothered to observe the others. At the same time he said begin, at least 10 people reached out towards him. Dark energy fluctuated violently. These fellows were all targeting his ears. Chi-Yu couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I only have 2 ears. What's the point of so many people fighting over them? Although this was what he was thinking, his body had already begun to move. The energy was completely restrained. Chi-Yu's expression became abnormally cold. His hands formed a circular arc around his body. His body was as stable as a mountain. The surrounding black generals immediately felt a huge wave of energy suddenly rush towards them, completely blocking their attacks. At this moment, Chi-Yu's clothes moved. Stepping on Kirin, his black body instantly became illusory. He easily tore off 3 ears from the crowd of black generals. 3 miserable screams rang out. Chi-Yu had begun his sneak attack. His hand looked very gentle, but a surge of lightning energy was already quietly emitting from it. He stealthily approached one of the black generals and pressed his right hand on his back. Borrowing the force, he floated forward and dodged the attacks from the other 4. Chi-Yu's hands were like the 1,000 hands guanyin, constantly waving. Every time he touched a black general's, a gentle wave of energy would enter their bodies. This wasn't true gentleness. Under the gentle water thundercloud force, a lightning bead had already entered the bodies of these people. This was the same type of lightning attribute energy as the ball of lightning. However, under the cover of the water thundercloud force, the black generals who had been injected with the lightning bead didn't feel too much. They only felt a cooling sensation where they had been patted. At this moment they were in a state of high tension. These black generals couldn't care less about these details. They all roared madly, trying to resist the hands that were trying to grab their ears. At the same time, they also had to think of a way to grab the ears of others. Chi-Yu's body was like a swimming fish, constantly weaving around the bodies of the black generals with a cold glint in his eyes. Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame His Majesty Satan. Since I've already come to Hell, then I can only do my best to weaken the overall strength of Hell. Chi-Yu acted very quickly. No one knew that he had already started to plant a time bomb in the bodies of the black generals participating in the matchmaking contest. That's right, a time bomb. Using the combination of the water thundercloud force and the thundercloud force, Chi-Yu followed the principle of a time bomb and left one lightning bead after another in the bodies of the people he patted. As long as the water thundercloud force dissipated in their bodies, then in the next moment, the small ball of lightning would explode in their bodies. This was a method that Chi-Yu had thought of while queuing up in the morning. Now was the time to test its effects. Chi-Yu bent down. It wasn't very obvious among the large number of black generals. Soon, he had already entered the midst of the black generals belonging to the Burning Legion. His movements became faster and more effective. Satan, oh Satan, I'm sorry, let me give you a big gift first. No matter what, you're still my father-in-law. The chaotic battle lasted for an hour before it ended. In the end, the number of black general tribesmen that were left was surprisingly small. Of the original 5,000 black general tribesmen and the 20,000 Burning Legion, only less than 2,000 were left. Actually, this was because Satan's command was too effective. There were many black generals with decent strength who had managed to grab 3 ears with great difficulty, only to have their ears torn off by others when they wanted to leave the battlefield. There were too many such examples. Thus, the number of ears lost by the black generals this time was incomparably large. After a later calculation, out of the 25,000 black generals who participated this time, half had actually lost 2 ears, while the rest had lost 1 ear. It was completely enough to form an earless army. As expected, the remaining 1,800 or so black generals were completely made up of winged black generals. Strength was the root of everything. All of the 4-winged black generals had passed through the chaotic battle just now. The 4-winged black generals were already extremely powerful. It was extremely difficult for ordinary black generals to even get close to them. On the other hand, the black generals on the 2 flanks had suffered significant losses. Of course, Chi Yu was definitely not one of them. Standing quietly in the middle of the victorious black generals, Chi Yu quickly activated the natural energy in his body, absorbing the energy molecules in the air to replenish himself. Although the thundercloud force had been upgraded to the level of 9 clouds, it was still not enough. However, his movements were so fast that even Chi Yu himself did not know how many thunder pearls he had used, but it was definitely not less than 5,000. With such a huge consumption of energy, even he had to quickly replenish it. However, the origin of nature was indeed magical. Even Satan couldn't compare to his energy recovery speed, so Chi Yu wasn't worried about his energy consumption. Under the command of the Burning Legion, the black generals who had lost their ears had already been sent out of the plaza. Some of the black generals who had failed in the first trial couldn't help but rejoice in their misfortune. Although they couldn't enter the princess's choice, at least they didn't lose their ears. However, they didn't know. In the near future, the black generals who had lost their ears would be put in an important position by Satan because they could pass the first trial. Of course, this was a story for another time. Satan looked at the remaining 1,000 or so people with satisfaction, then turned to Lung Er beside him. I've already eliminated most of them, you can start choosing now. I believe that among them there will definitely be someone that you'll be satisfied with. To Satan's surprise, Lung Er actually nodded, and there was even a hint of anticipation in her pink eyes. Could it be that his daughter had changed her mind? Or had she given in under the pressure that he had given her? Satan couldn't help but feel a little happy. After all, his daughter was his, and his orders were absolute to her. Satan waved his hand, and Lucifer brought the 3 dreadlords away from the platform quietly. The remaining 1,800 people in the plaza below formed a long line under the supervision of the Burning Legion, standing in an arc in the middle of the plaza. Lucifer quickly brought the 3 6-winged dreadlords to the plaza, and said in a low voice, "You will soon be received by Her Royal Highness. Whether or not you become the prince's son-in-law, this will be the greatest honor of your lives. Remember, when you see Her Royal Highness, if anyone dares to blaspheme her, there will only be one result, and that is to be thrown into the canyon of 10,000 demons. All right, let's begin according to the order." Under the lead of the 3 dreadlords, the long line of people walked towards the direction of the Demon King's citadel. The Demon King's citadel was over 1,000 meters tall, and these people were naturally not allowed to go up. Lung Er stood at the outermost edge of the platform. With her eyesight, although she was quite far away, she could still see the people walking down the Demon King's citadel. In front of the Demon King's citadel, there was already a platform that was about 100 meters tall. 1,800 people went up from one direction and down from the other. Everyone was allowed to stay on the platform for 5 seconds, and after bowing respectfully towards the Demon King's citadel, they could only descend from the other side. Chiyu was in the middle of the line. Seeing the black generals deliberately putting on their most handsome appearance, he couldn't help but feel a little amused. Why was this like an ancient talent show in the Yenhuang Republic, just that they were transferred here? It was Princess Lung Er who wanted to marry the prince consort. What a joke! What was even funnier was that he was actually one of them. Because of some people's deliberate delay, the 1,800 people took more than 2 hours to walk from the platform. No, this isn't him. This isn't him either. Lung Er's gaze became more and more disappointed. It was already the last few people, but she still hadn't found the person she was looking for. He Ming was here. With his strength, it was impossible for him to be eliminated in the previous 2 tests. In other words, he was definitely among the 1,800 people. That's right, he looked like the black generals, and he had that Kirin armor. Others definitely wouldn't be able to recognize him, but how could she not recognize him? However, now that it was already the last few people, there was still no sign of him. Chi. You bastard, where the hell are you? Actually, Chiyu had already walked over from the platform. Under the circumstances, he naturally couldn't let Lung Er recognize him. If Lung Er recognized him, it meant that Satan would recognize him. When she saw him, her emotions would definitely change. With Satan's strength, it could be said that he would definitely be able to sense it. Therefore, when it was Chi-Yu's turn to go up on the platform, he relied on his exquisite control of energy to not only completely conceal his aura, but at the same time, he used the energy of the source of nature to change the muscles on his face, making him look more handsome than before. However, he didn't look like himself anymore. He was easily ignored by Lung Er. How about it? My good daughter, is there not a single person that you like? Or you can choose some of them to compete with. Whoever wins will be the final winner. How about it? Satan gave his suggestion to Lung Er. Lung Er shook her head and said, "None of them are qualified to be my son-in-law. Father, since you've already decided, then I'll leave this matter to you." Satan frowned slightly. Although Lung Er didn't object, he could naturally see many things from the dim light in his daughter's eyes. He only had one daughter. It was impossible to say that he didn't feel heartache for her. However, as the ruler of hell, he definitely wouldn't change his mind about something that he had already decided on. More than 1,800 people remained in the plaza. After Satan and Lucifer discussed for a while, they decided to carry out the second plan. Those who could remain. Almost all of them were envoys of the younger generation of the Black Generals clan. Satan followed the original plan and ordered the Burning Legion to move. Apart from the Black Generals clan, the Burning Legion quickly divided up empty spaces in the empty plaza. Each empty space was about 10 feet long. A total of 500 such empty spaces were carved out. The betrothal contest had entered the stage of the martial arts competition. There were more than 1,800 people in any combination. They were scattered, and 3 or 4 people were arranged in a square of empty space. Satan's orders were simple. The 500 people who could emerge victorious from the battle royale of 3 or 4 people would enter the next round of selection. Chiyu was rather unlucky. There were a total of 4 people in the empty space where he was. 2 of them were 4-winged Black Generals clan experts. The 2 4-winged Black Generals looked at each other helplessly. Through the exchange of glances, they had already made a decision. They would first get rid of the 2 2-winged people in front of them, then decide the winner. After all, only one person could be the winner here. Dark energy surged in an instant, and the 2 4-winged people pounced directly at Chi-Yu and the other 2-winged Black General. To them, there was no doubt that a 4-winged versus a 2-winged person would win. Although it wouldn't be an instant kill, With the difference between a two-winged and a four-winged person, they definitely wouldn't last a minute under their attack. Their thoughts weren't wrong. Under normal circumstances, that would be the case. However, they were rather unlucky, because one of the two-winged people in front of them wasn't a black general at all, but a human from Earth. The strongest person among humans, the king of the Zodiac, who possessed god-level abilities. Chiyu feigned a panicked expression. Seeing his opponent pounce at him, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his lips. He wouldn't let the battle end so quickly. Satan and Lucifer were watching from the Demon King's fortress. He definitely wouldn't let himself show the slightest flaw. Therefore, when he saw the four-winged opponent pouncing at him, he turned and ran. His movements were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was already at the edge of the Burning Legion's defense. As long as he left the edge, he would be eliminated. Seeing that Chiyu was fleeing in panic, the four-winged black general snorted in disdain. He spread his 5 fingers, and black energy condensed into powerful energy rays in the air. 2 huge dark claws grabbed at Chiyu's body. Chiyu was as slippery as a fish. Just as he was about to be attacked by the dark energy, his body suddenly leaned to the side, as if he had lost his footing, and suddenly fell to the ground. However, just as he was about to touch the ground, his left hand pressed on the ground, and his body immediately shot out like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, he had already leaped out of his opponent's blockade. A blood-curdling scream was heard, and the other two-winged black general was sent flying out of the battle circle by the four-winged black general's attack. After all, they were all from the same tribe, so the four-winged black general had a sense of propriety. Although he was seriously injured, the two-winged black general was not dead yet. "Why haven't you finished yet?" the four-winged black general who had defeated his opponent said somewhat impatiently. The four-winged black general who was chasing Chiyu could not help but be furious. He simply gave up the chase. The energy in his body suddenly rose, and a surging black weapon burst forth. In the blink of an eye, it had completely enveloped the entire open space, plunging the place into darkness. The other four-winged black general seemed to want to finish the battle as soon as possible. The last thing the surrounding Burning Legion soldiers saw was him pouncing in Chiyu's direction. The thick black fog lasted for a full minute before disappearing. The sound of energy bursting could be heard continuously. Because of the black fog, nobody knew what was going on inside. Of course, if one had enough mental strength, they could still explore the situation inside. However, at this time, which powerhouse with sufficient mental strength would pay attention to the battle here? Chapter 297. Chiyu put on a fearful expression and chuckled. Lucky, really lucky. Both of them are seriously injured. The truth seemed to be as he said. The two four-wingers stared at each other and stood there motionlessly. One of their hands was stabbed into each other's hearts. Blood kept flowing down from their bodies, and it seemed like they were not going to survive. Of course, the truth would not be as simple as Chiyu said. The four-winged black generals were not a threat to him at all. Let alone two, even if there were 200 of them here, he could still deal with them easily. Under the cover of the black fog, Chiyu suddenly released his true strength. With the power of Kirin's origin, he easily took care of the two fellows and put them in this position. A faint light flashed and Chiyu's eyes revealed a cold glint that no one could detect. At this time, the outcome of most of the 500 battlefields had been decided. Among the 1,800 people before, the four-wingers accounted for about 1/5 of the number, which was more than 300 people. At this time, most of the victors were four-wingers. Only a very small number of two-wingers were either lucky enough to be assigned to an empty space where the opponent was also a two-winger, or they were really strong. Although the difference between a two-winger and a four-winger was huge, there were some exceptions. Just like in the Kirin clan, even if Ink Kirin was 1 cloud lower, he could still defeat a high-level Kirin. The 500 people did not even have time to rest before they were immediately separated again. This time, the empty space separated by the Burning Legion had increased from 500 to 250. It was a 2-on-1 fight, a fair fight. Chi-Yu was still unlucky this time. It was still a four-winger opponent. Almost the same as before, this opponent looked at Chi-Yu with disdain. At this time, Chi-Yu no longer planned to hide anything. The four-winged black general floated up and appeared in front of Chi-Yu in the blink of an eye. The surging dark energy formed a large net, enveloping Chi-Yu's body from all directions. Chi-Yu could not help but be alarmed when he sensed the characteristics of the other party's energy. Although the energy of these black generals was far from his, it was still far from being comparable to him. However, in terms of combat, it was very flexible. Everyone had different characteristics. The same dark energy was used in different ways. The web-like attack in front of them was very unique. Like a spider hunting its prey, it played a huge role. At the very least, it prevented Chi-Yu from dodging in any direction. 4 wings against 2 wings. His opponent had no chance of escaping. The black general in front of him seemed to already see victory and was waving at him. He was indeed waving his hand. However, it wasn't victory. Instead, it was a large black hand that seemed to be filled with darkness energy. However, the moment it approached, the black general clearly saw it. On the edge of his palm, there was a silver light. Dark energy suddenly burst forth, and the four-winged warrior raised his right arm to block the attack. At the same time, his left leg sprang up like a razor, kicking straight at the opponent's lower abdomen. If this kind of power hit, even if he didn't die, he would die. He would also have to shed a layer of skin. However, he no longer had the chance, because the opponent he was facing was not the one he had imagined. The air seemed to disappear in an instant, vanishing into the silver border. His body froze, and in the next moment, he clearly felt as if something was spurting out of his body. The black figure passed right in front of him. Impossible, how could he pass it through my body? This was this four-winged black general's final thought. In the next moment, his body had already crashed to the ground. The answer to the riddle was revealed. What was the best way for a person to pass it on to another person? It was to cut the opponent in half. From the central position, Chi-Yu stood in the open with a cold expression. Without even looking at his opponent, he walked out of the open space and gathered with the victors. In the open space where he had fought before, there was a corpse that had been cut in half from the center. Kirin's Shura blade was derived from Miero's Hell Shura blade, but it was much more powerful. With the power of Kirin's arm, it was extremely sharp. How could a four-winged black general resist it? Moreover, before his opponent was attacked by Chi-Yu, he had spread out a large amount of his energy in an attempt to control the area where Chi-Yu could dodge. This time, Chi-Yu finally attracted a lot of attention, because no one could clearly see what he had done. His opponent had already been cut in half. It should be noted that he was now in the form of a two-winged warrior. A two-winged warrior killing a four-winged warrior was something that had never happened in the history of the Black Generals. However, there were too many participants in the competition, and Chi-Yu was very good at controlling his own energy. The Kirin Shura blade he had unleashed just happened to break his opponent's defense, and there was no excess energy seeping out. This meant that even though he had attracted a lot of attention, it was only within a very small area. Out of the 500 to 250, only 3 people had died. After all, this was a competition, and Satan had already given the order to minimize casualties. Chi-Yu's appearance had been changed by him to be very inconspicuous. Although his actions this time were a little big, it still did not attract too much attention. However, after this round of competition ended, there were only a few people left from the two-winged Black General clan. The venue was changed once again. The number of venues was reduced by half, but the area of each venue was expanded. The people at the end of the stage were stronger, so the bigger the venue, the higher the standard of the contestants. So, relatively speaking, a bigger venue would allow them to perform at a higher level. Standing in the crowd, Chi-Yu had a faint smile on his face. Today, he was here to cause trouble, not to find a wife. However, finding a wife was also one of his goals. At least, he would not allow anyone to lay their hands on his woman. Chi-Yu was lucky this time. He had encountered an opponent from the two wings. To prevent himself from attracting Satan's attention too early, he had entangled with his opponent for at least 10 minutes before he managed to kick his opponent down at the last moment. This time, it was not fatal, not because Chi-Yu was being kind, but because he had already installed a lightning orb in his opponent's body. Those lightning orbs were Chi-Yu's gift to Satan. Now was not the right time to show this gift. At this time, there were only 125 people left in the venue, and Chi-Yu was the only one left from the two-winged black generals. Before the next round of competition began, Satan ordered that the 125 people should take a break. After all, one after another, the battle had already used up a great deal of their energy. Other than a freak like Chi-Yu, not many people could endure such a huge consumption. Everyone made use of this short period of time to cultivate, trying to recover as much energy as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. Chi-Yu sat in the crowd. His spiritual force carefully expanded, replacing his eyes to observe the situation around him. The light of the purple sun was still as strong as ever, and the hell creatures watching from the core of hell had long since gone berserk due to the blood and gore of the battle. If not for the fact that Satan's might was the most insurmountable peak in their hearts, some of them would have long since charged out. Satan stood on the high platform. His gaze swept across the remaining 125 young elites of the Black Generals clan, and a look of satisfaction appeared on his face. The Black Generals clan had become more and more powerful, and their rate of improvement was far beyond that of the other clans. Under his care, the Black Generals clan had grown very quickly in all aspects. Perhaps it was because he had watched too many human movies, and his current sense of beauty was already very close to that of humans. Apart from the Black Generals clan, the other hell creatures were not much different from magical beasts in his eyes. "Lung-Er, do you still not have a final choice?" Satan asked his daughter as he looked down. Lung-Er shook her head. "Since Father wants to help me decide, then you should decide to the end. After all, I can't change your mind. Isn't that right? Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it." Lung-Er's words sounded very obedient, but anyone could hear the resentment in her voice. Her marriage had been decided so carelessly, how could she not be angry? Moreover, she only had one candidate in mind. Satan seemed to not hear the dissatisfaction in his daughter's voice, and nodded. "Since that's the case, then you can continue waiting. It will end very soon. When there are only 10 people left, Father will definitely choose the most outstanding Black Generals clan member to be your son-in-law." Chi-Yu had already spread his spiritual force to the greatest extent. Apart from the Demon King's citadel, he could almost clearly see every corner of the core circle of hell through his spiritual force. Whether it was the Black Generals clan members who had already left the central plaza, or the remaining 100 or so people, or the Black Generals clan youths who had been struck by the lightning bead, his spiritual force could clearly sense the location of every single one of them. This was a wonderful feeling, as if he was holding more than 5,000 detonators in his hands, and could bring disaster to this place at any time. However, for Chi-Yu, this kind of disaster was far from enough. At this time, the core circle of hell was densely populated, and it was hard to imagine. Especially near the inner circle, it was already overcrowded. If he could have a few nuclear bombs, how wonderful would it be? At that time, even the Burning Legion would probably be wiped out by him. At the very least, he could help Satan get rid of the weaker ones. The break ended after 20 minutes, and most people dragged their tired bodies to stand up again. However, for the sake of their ultimate goal, their eyes were still flickering with excitement and bloodthirst. They had already come this far, and no one would retreat easily. Everyone hoped that they could be the lucky one. Satan waved his hand, and Lucifer, who was beside him, immediately ordered the competition to start again. The number of hesitant people was 125. Therefore, everyone was divided into 25 groups, and each group had 5 people. This time, it was no longer individual battles, but group battles. The 5 people in each group were temporary groups, and they had to defeat the other group to advance to the next round. The 25 hesitant groups were odd numbers, and after drawing lots, one of the groups would be lucky to get a bye. At this time, the group that could get a bye was obviously the luckiest. After all, there were only a few matches left. The 4 people who were in the same group as Chi Yu were all angry and unwilling. In their opinion, being in the same group with a 2-winged clansman had undoubtedly announced their fate of being eliminated. The disparity in strength would make it very difficult for them to compete with the other 24 group. However, perhaps it was the arrangement of the heavens, as their group was actually lucky enough to get a bye. Heavens! Great demon god, you finally care for your most sincere believer. This is great, this is just too wonderful. A middle-aged man from the Black General clan shouted excitedly. Among all the participants, he was one of the older ones. Apart from Chi Yu, the other 3 people were also ecstatic. It should be known that getting a bye was not as simple as having one less match. At the same time, when the other groups tried their best to advance, their strength would definitely be greatly reduced. When that time came, they would be able to wait at ease, and they would very likely be able to advance to the finals. Of course, this was only what they thought. When Chi Yu saw that his group had a bye, he could not help but be surprised. Looking at the excited faces of the other members of the Black General clan, he could not help but think to himself, do you need to be like this? I want to fight more. That's the only way I can kill more people. Brothers, let's discuss our next strategy. The middle-aged man from the Black General clan was obviously very experienced in battle. At this moment, they were grasshoppers tied on a string. The others hurriedly gathered around him. After all, there were 10 spots in the final round, and Satan would choose from among the 10. In other words, 2 groups would be chosen. At this moment, in order to obtain the right to be chosen, these fellows' belief in working together could be said to be unprecedentedly high. The 4 of them did not care about Chi Yu's existence at all, and sat together in a circle. However, the more strength they had, the more chances they had of winning. In the end, the middle-aged man still called the lazy Chi Yu over. All right, everyone should be very clear about the situation at hand now. We are not very familiar with each other, so why don't we get to know each other first? My name is Pascal. Time is of the essence. Once this round ends, I'm afraid the next round will begin, and then there will be 13 groups. I'm afraid it will be very difficult for us to be lucky enough to get a bye. I won't call you by your names, you can just call me number 1, and then you will be number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. The middle-aged man was the first to introduce himself. His hand finally pointed to Chi Yu, who was also the so-called 5th brother. Our current chance is undoubtedly the greatest. Since we didn't participate in this round of the competition, we have more time to rest. When it's our turn to fight, I'm thinking that I'll be the main force and the 4 of you will be my support. When the time comes, as soon as the competition starts, we'll focus our attacks on one of the opponents. The 5 of us will launch energy attacks at the same time. If the effects are good, we might be able to instantly kill off one of the opponents. At that time, our chances of winning will greatly increase. Number 3 hesitated and said, but, number 1, His Majesty Satan has already said before that we should try our best to reduce the number of casualties during the competition. Number 1 said in a bad mood, reducing the number of casualties doesn't mean that there is no damage. This is a duel, not a competition. In order to obtain the right to be chosen, we must be unscrupulous. This is the ability that we, the people of Hell, should master the most. Don't you understand? So what if one of us can obtain the recognition of His Majesty and Her Highness the Princess in the end? That's the most important thing. There are so many of us black generals. Isn't it normal for some to die? Besides, there have already been deaths before. Hearing number 1, whose name was Pascal, say this, Chi Yu instantly felt that he was much more pleasing to the eye. He hurriedly nodded and said, I support number 1's decision. At this crucial moment, we must let go of all other thoughts and focus on victory. Number 1 glanced at Chi Yu, who was the weakest, and said approvingly, That's right. Very well, since there are no objections, it's decided. When the time comes, everyone must give it their all and concentrate their attack energy on one point, catching the opponents off guard. After that, the number of enemies we'll be facing will increase from 5 to 4. To be able to hold out until now, I think everyone's strength is about the same. We have 4 four-wingers against the opponent's 4 four-wingers. If we want to obtain victory, we'll need a very long contest. And at this time, number 5, you'll be the key. When the time comes, what you need to do is launch a sneak attack. Focus on the opponent's weakest first. Join forces with our group to launch a sneak attack. As long as we can kill any one of them, then victory is already in sight. The battle strategy number 1 suggested was very simple, but very practical. In a situation where both sides' strength was about the same, using an artificial gap in numbers to obtain the final victory was undoubtedly the most labor-saving method. Black Chi rampaged in the central square, and huge amounts of dark energy could be seen everywhere. Rumbling sounds rose and fell, causing chaotic ripples to appear in this world filled with evil energy. This time, the competition ended much slower than Chi Yu and the others had imagined. 5 against 5. In a situation where both sides' strength was about the same. The battles had become extremely bitter. Every group had gone through a battle of life and death before the final victor was decided. However, the severity of the battle's attrition had far exceeded Satan's expectations. A total of 24 groups had fought. Of the 12 groups that had won, 5 of them had lost the ability to continue fighting. And the remaining 7 groups that could continue, each and every one of them had become riddled with scars. From the beginning of entering the central square until now, they had consumed too much energy. It had become too difficult to continue fighting. In this round of the competition, the number of deaths was as high as 37 people. The total number of deaths was even higher than in the previous rounds when there were more participants. It could be seen how intense the battle was. Lucifer stood beside Satan and asked in a low voice, Your Majesty, what should we do now? It seems that it will be very difficult to continue. If we force it to continue, this competition will become unfair. Satan pondered for a moment and said, There are still 40 people. Except for the group that didn't participate in the previous battle, they have all consumed a lot of energy. This is exactly the ending I want to see. Lucifer, don't you think that this is the only situation where they can fully display their potential? Now, they are not only competing in terms of their energy and battle technique. At the same time, they are competing in terms of their willpower. Whoever has a stronger willpower will be able to survive better. Only such a person is qualified to be my son-in-law. Lucifer hesitated and said, Then, you mean, Satan waved his hand and said, Battle Royale. The remaining 40 people will engage in a battle royale. The 10 people who are still standing will be the victors. As for the group that didn't participate in the previous battle, let Matawikia go down and fight with them for 20 minutes. After that, the competition will begin. Lucifer finally understood Satan's meaning. He nodded his head and nodded to the terrifying demon King Matawikia behind him. Matawikia's eyes revealed a trace of malevolence. He, who had always been bloodthirsty and warlike, had long been unable to endure the battle below. Once he received Lucifer's instructions, he turned and walked down. Even with his status, he had to walk down from the Demon King's fortress and not fly down. This was Satan's authority. Lucifer stood on the platform. His voice spread far away under the influence of the enormous energy. Every hell creature in the core circle of hell could hear him. When Chi Yu's group suddenly heard the bad news, their faces instantly turned pale. Their luck didn't continue, and the battle tactics they had discussed were no longer of use. Enduring the attacks of the six-winged, terrifying demon King Matawikia for 20 minutes was probably a greater loss of energy than fighting with the other groups. How would they have the chance to continue participating in the battle royale? The oppressive atmosphere made everyone feel as though they couldn't breathe. Number 1 roared angrily, "Let's go all out, brothers! No matter how the battle royale turns out, if we can't hold on for 20 minutes against Lord Matawikia, then the opportunity that we fought so hard for will disappear. There's no need to say anything else. Later on, we will be the main attackers. No one needs to be lazy. We must display our strength to the fullest. When the time comes, as long as we can hold on against Lord Matawikia's attacks, we will have a place in His Majesty Satan's memory." Number 2, Number 3, and Number 4 all agreed loudly. Chi Yu nodded as well. "Matawikia, we meet again. You were the one who hurt me the last time. What gift should I give you this time?" Matawikia walked down from the Demon King's fortress. His body was close to the ground, as though he was gliding. In a few flashes, he had already arrived in front of Chi Yu's group. The 6 wings on his back were fully opened, and a huge energy wave locked onto the youths of the Black Generals in front of him. To him, this mission was too easy for him. The difference between a 4-winged and a 6-winged was not just the ratio of the wings. It was a difference of several times. Be it in terms of energy, physical strength, or speed, a 6-winged was incomparable to a 4-winged. Although it was 1 against 5, to him this was a very easy task. Number 1 respectfully said, "Lord Matawikia, please have mercy. If we can." Just as he said this, Matawikia waved his hand impatiently. "All right, let's begin." What a joke. His Majesty Satan was watching from above. With him around, it was impossible for him to go easy on them. He still wanted to live for another 2 years. Dark energy was released instantly, and Chi Yu and the other 4 could clearly feel the air around them thickening. Number 1 to Number 4 did not understand the reason. Only Chi Yu knew. This was the power of a domain. Matawikia moved. Facing these 4-winged opponents, he had the right to be proud. His body flashed, and he punched out 5 times at the same time. 5 huge waves of energy smashed towards Chi Yu and the other 4 like 5 huge hammers. His powerful attack was undoubtedly on display. Compared to when he was on Earth, he was indeed much stronger. However, compared to his strength on Earth, his current strength was far from Chi Yu's speed of improvement. The other 4 subconsciously raised their hands, using all their dark energy to defend against Matawikia's attack. Meanwhile, Chi Yu quickly took 2 steps back. Matawikia's domain did not affect him much. A faint light flashed, and Chi Yu's hands lit up with a greenish-gray light. That was the power of the wind. When the wind condensed into a sharp blade, it fused with Kiran's origin energy and nature's origin energy into his right arm, forming his self-created Kiran's Shura blade. Seeing the opponent's energy attack in front of him, Chi Yu's body did not move. He gently raised his right arm, and a greenish-silver light flashed. With a tearing sound, the ball of dark energy that was attacking him was split into 2 halves. The 2 halves flew past his body and let out an ear-piercing shriek. Number 1 to Number 4 groaned at the same time. They were pushed back by Matawikia's attack. Matawikia was surprised, and his gaze fell on Chi Yu. Chi Yu did not retreat. He was the only one who did not retreat. Although he knew that Satan was watching from above, he did not want to hide his strength anymore. He stepped forward, and in the blink of an eye, he had already circled to Matawikia's side. The Shura blade's sharpness was directly aimed at Matawikia's body. The sharpness of the blade shocked Matawikia. The energy in his body suddenly burst forth. At this moment, he no longer cared about the principle of not being able to fly here. His body floated up by 3 meters, and only then did he manage to dodge Chi Yu's attack. His body swayed slightly in the air, and countless palm shadows were aimed at Chi-Yu. Kirin's swim showed his prowess under the support of Chi-Yu's enormous energy. He moved his body like the floating clouds and flowing water, dodging Matawikia's attacks. Although the surging dark energy was extremely powerful, he was always able to find a relatively weak spot. He used Kirin's Shura blade to dissolve the opponent's attack. "Number 1, are you guys not going to make a move?" Chi-Yu shouted. Number 1 and the other 3 only woke up from their dream. They thought to themselves, no wonder he could last until now even with the strength of 2 wings. He could even withstand Matawikia's attack. It seemed that his strength was definitely not as simple as 2 wings. Even though they had such thoughts in their hearts, Number 1 and the others still dashed forward. As Matawikia's main focus was on attacking Chi-Yu, he instantly relaxed his control over his domain. This allowed the 4 of them to fully unleash their attack. The combat power of the 4 four-winged black generals was still very strong. In an instant, the black energy in different forms kept flashing in the air. The huge energy collided, causing the energy ripples in the air to become stronger and stronger. Every time the energy collided, the entire central square would tremble. Other than the explosion just now, Chi-Yu immediately restrained himself. He did not launch any strong attacks. Instead, he mixed in with the other 4 and occasionally attacked Matawikia with his palm. As long as Matawikia attacked him, he would immediately turn around and run away. He would not give Matawikia any chance to catch him. Matawikia was very depressed. If he had a fair fight with his opponent, even if his opponent was strong enough to defeat him, he would not feel so bad. However, the current situation of the battle was very subtle. On the surface, he seemed to be fighting with the 4 four-winged black generals with all his strength. However, more than 70% of his attention was placed on the slippery 2-winged black generals. In Matawikia's eyes, Chi-Yu was like a venomous snake waiting for an opportunity to strike. He could explode and hurt people at any time. He had already experienced Chi-Yu's attacks in the 2 previous collisions. That extremely sharp energy did not feel strong, but it was very destructive. If he was not careful, his protective energy would be broken by Chi-Yu's Kirin Shura blade. This made him not dare to be careless. He was afraid that Chi-Yu would launch a sneak attack on him. Therefore, throughout the entire battle, he had been staring at Chi-Yu's movements. Chi-Yu's spiritual power also happened to be locked on him, so he did not dare to ignore him. Under such circumstances, how could Matawikia perform normally? As time passed, it became more and more strenuous for him to deal with it. At this moment, even Satan could not see the profoundness of this. After all, the feeling of being locked on by spiritual power could only be understood by the person being locked on. Chi-Yu looked at Matawikia, who was about to explode, and could not help but laugh in his heart. "I'll give you some presents later. Consider it my repayment for injuring me back then." 20 minutes passed very quickly. Although Matawikia was unwilling, he definitely did not dare to go against Satan's words. Therefore, when the 20 minutes were up, he immediately unleashed an attack with all his might. Only then did he escape unscathed. His gaze that was filled with hatred was focused on Chi-Yu. He used his finger to point at Chi-Yu's head and said, "Brat, just you wait." Chapter 298. "My lord, this is just a small gift." Chi-Yu smiled as he held Matawikia's hand. Matawikia was furious. "Bastard, even if you want to bribe me, you shouldn't be here. Don't you know that His Majesty Satan is watching from above?" With a wave of his hand, he hurriedly threw Chi-Yu aside, snorted angrily, and returned to the Demon King's castle. Just as his hand touched Chi-Yu's, he only felt a cool stream of air flowing into his body, but it was not harmful. Instead, it made him feel very comfortable. He thought to himself, "Looks like this kid is going to give me a treasure." Otherwise, he wouldn't have such a feeling. As long as he wasn't chosen as the Emperor's son-in-law, it wouldn't be too late to take it. However, he did not know that Chi-Yu had given him a huge gift. Chi-Yu raised his head and looked towards the Demon King's castle, but what greeted him were 4 gazes, 2 of which belonged to Satan, and 2 of which belonged to Lucifer. 4 sharp gazes fell on Chi-Yu. Satan's gaze was filled with surprise, while Lucifer's gaze was filled with doubt. They all seemed to be thinking about something. With Satan's strength, although he was unable to discern the true situation of the battle, he could tell that Chi-Yu's team had been able to withstand Matawikia's attack so easily. Chi-Yu had definitely played a crucial role in this. As for how he did it, even Satan wasn't very clear. Lucifer was puzzled because of the energy emanating from Chi-Yu's body. Due to the humiliation he had suffered, he was very familiar with Chi-Yu's source of nature and Kiran's source of origin. Therefore, when Chi-Yu was fighting Matawikia, although he had purposely restrained his own energy, he still felt that Chi-Yu's energy was somewhat familiar. It was just that he had not been able to identify it yet. Satan waved his hand. He said, "You may begin. I will choose one of the last 10 to become Ling Heir's prince. The wedding will be held in 10 days. 40 people. The remaining 40 people looked at each other and pounced out almost at the same time. Everyone's eyes had turned blood red. 10 people. In other words, 3/4 of the people here had to be eliminated. No one wanted to be the one to be eliminated. However, in front of Satan, they could not back down and could only show their brave side. These exhausted black general clansmen all used all their strength, and the dark energy swelled up like never before. Even the purple sun in the sky seemed to have dimmed a bit because of these desperate people. Chi-Yu's aura changed. From the beginning of the final battle, his aura had changed. He bent down slightly like a cheetah ready to pounce, waiting quietly. Perhaps it was because of the battle between him and Matawikia. At the start of the battle, no one chose to attack him. Raising his head to look at the stage, the corner of Chi-Yu's mouth revealed a trace of a callous smile. "Satan, do not blame me. Who asked you to attack the world that belongs to me?" At this moment, he no longer hid his aura. A tyrannical Qilin energy surged out of his body. He stretched his arms and looked lazily at Ling Heir, who was standing on the platform of the Demon King castle. Satan, Lucifer and Ling Heir's gazes froze on Chi-Yu almost at the same time. Although there were still 39 black general clansmen fighting in the central square, at this moment, it seemed like there was only Chi-Yu in the square. Compared to the other black general clansmen, his body was not considered tall, but at this moment, he seemed very majestic. The huge energy waves kept increasing. Ling Heir's pupils suddenly contracted. She did not see wrongly. He really came. But Chi-Yu, why did you come? Her heart was filled with contradictions. She wanted Chi-Yu to bring her away from here, but at the same time, she wanted him to escape immediately. This was the center of hell. With her father here, how could he have a chance? He did not retract his opened arms. When Satan noticed him, the energy waves on Chi-Yu's body suddenly erupted. A blue light shot up into the sky with his body as the center. The huge energy light beam was more than a meter in diameter. The intense energy waves immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. It was not the gentle water thundercloud force, but the extremely terrifying thunder attribute energy. At that moment, the dark energy in the entire arena was instantly repelled by the righteous chi in the thundercloud force. The purple sun in the sky obviously dimmed a lot. There was a loud rumble in the air, and it was as if the entire world of hell was trembling. The 39 four-winged black generals, who had been fighting desperately just now, all subconsciously stopped what they were doing. The terrifying energy aura was right beside them, suppressing them so much that even breathing became difficult. The thunder attribute completely suppressed each other. The overbearing thunder attribute energy made their hearts tremble. "Your Majesty Satan, let me give you the first big gift." Chi-Yu looked up to the sky and laughed. As he shouted, he suddenly raised his arms, which were stretched to both sides of his body. The huge blue energy beam had completely swallowed his body. Thunder and lightning flashed in the sky. By the time Satan reacted, the blue energy beam had already split. The blue light beam instantly split into 39 twisted bolts and burst forth. One side of the lightning was close to the ground, while the other side towered into the clouds. The tearing sound brought by the flashing lightning was like the call of the Grim Reaper. Within the area covered by the blue lightning, the air was completely distorted, and any energy elements were crushed by the huge thundercloud force. Thunder, God, split, space, annihilation. A cold voice dyed Chi Yu's silver hair, making him look so tyrannical. Ever since Satan came to power in the Hell world, he was the first person who dared to despise Satan's majesty. Feeling the destructive power contained in the huge thundercloud force, Lungare's expression changed, Lucifer's expression changed, and Satan's expression changed even more. Lucifer let out a shrill roar, spread his 8 wings at the same time, and pounced out of the Demon King fortress. However, how could his flying speed be compared with the speed of the lightning? It was already too late. Thunder and lightning cage every 4-winged black general who participated in the marriage contest seemed to have received the thunder god's favor as if they were equipped with a magnet. The lightning that was split from Chi Yu's body. In the thick distortion, it swallowed their bodies. Even if they reacted fast enough and burst out their dark energy at the last moment, it would be useless at this time. The dark energy couldn't persist in the face of the thundercloud force's awe-inspiring righteousness. Their strength was far inferior to Chi Yu's. After absorbing the lightning ball, Chi Yu's thundercloud force was infinitely close to the 9 clouds realm. That powerful ability was something that even gods would be jealous of, let alone these insignificant dark creatures. Amidst the loud boom, the entire central plaza had an additional 39 black statues. The awe-inspiring lightning had already blasted them into charcoal. It was an instant change. Every dark creature watching the battle couldn't help but tremble. What kind of power was that? He had actually killed 39 powerful 4-winged black generals in an instant. The next moment, a greenish-gray energy lit up. That was the light of a tornado. Chi Yu's gaze became even colder. He didn't even look at Lucifer, who was pouncing towards him, and the greenish-gray tornado suddenly erupted. It completely disintegrated the 39 charcoal statues around him, and they scattered in all directions, filling the core circle of hell with a burnt smell. Lucifer had come. His heart was filled with a mixture of shock and anger. He didn't expect Chi Yu to appear here, nor did he expect him to kill so many black generals. One had to know. The 4-winged black generals could be said to be the absolute elites of the entire black generals. These people could all become future dreadlords, and Satan was from the black generals. What would Satan think when so many elites died at once? And he was in charge of the defense of the Demon King's citadel. Now that something like this had happened, there was no way he could explain it to Satan. The greenish-gray tornado didn't stop. It circled around Chi Yu's body, and the huge wind was filled with a powerful cutting force. Seeing Lucifer pouncing towards him, Chi Yu faced him proudly. He raised his right arm and pointed his index finger in Lucifer's direction. Lucifer suddenly felt the air around his body solidify. Immediately after, a blue ball of light exploded from Chi Yu's body. The size of the ball of light was the diameter of Chi Yu's body. It shot out of his body in a beautiful arc, heading towards his body. Based on Lucifer's past experience in fighting with Chi Yu, he knew that it was impossible for him to escape from Chi Yu's spiritual power lock. But at the same time, he also understood that he might not be able to withstand such an attack from Thundercloud Force. With Satan watching from behind, he had no other choice but to face a strong enemy in front of him. His body that was charging forward suddenly stopped. The 8 wings on Lucifer's back spread out, and a huge amount of dark energy instantly condensed. A black and purple ball of light appeared between his palms. At this moment, in order to show his absolute loyalty to Satan, Lucifer gave it his all and displayed the strongest ability he could display. Satan had already stood up from his tall throne when the Thunder God's spatial destruction exploded. His eyes were filled with shock and anger. At this moment, when he suddenly saw the blue ball of light, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise. Of course he knew what it was. To be able to display such a powerful thundercloud force, who was this person? When did the Black Generals have such a strong person? Judging from how he killed those 39 people in seconds, his strength was even above Lucifer's. Lingaire's delicate body trembled uncontrollably. From the moment Chi Yu appeared until now, her heartbeat had increased by at least 3 times. What was he going to do? Could it be that he wanted to rely on his own strength to fight against the entire hell? Crazy, he must be crazy. She wanted to shout for Chi Yu to quickly escape, but she couldn't make a single sound. Her beautiful pink eyes were filled with panic, and before she knew it, she had already arrived at the edge of the platform. The blue ball of lightning had already arrived in front of Lucifer. What Chi Yu had simulated with the thundercloud force was exactly the appearance of the ball of lightning, but there was a difference on the inside. Boom! Lucifer's dark red ball of light collided with the huge ball of lightning. This time, the entire hell world was no longer trembling, but quaking. The huge energy shockwave swept away a large portion of the spectators in the core circle of hell. The vast energy shockwave instantly caused the ground between Chi Yu and Lucifer to sink by 10 feet. The pure thundercloud force in the ball of lightning instantly shattered Lucifer's dark energy. However, as a fallen angel, Lucifer was, after all, the strongest person in hell apart from Satan. Of course, this was under the condition that Satan wasn't included. The ball of lightning finally shattered in front of him. Even so, Lucifer still felt a numbness all over his body. Just when he was shocked by the improvement of Chi Yu's strength, a green light suddenly lit up in the blue ball of light that had disappeared. The area of the light was very small, and it looked like a thin green line. However, it was like the fangs of a poisonous snake, quietly kissing Lucifer's body. In the face of such a close attack, Lucifer, who had rich combat experience, could only move his body slightly to the side at the last moment. The dark energy in his body completely burst out, and even the core of the dark fire had already been ignited. A huge energy fluctuation. However, it was not simple sharpness. The highly compressed wind thundercloud force, with the help of the source of nature energy, cut through Lucifer's defense in an instant. Although it deviated a little under the influence of the dark energy, it still bombarded Lucifer's right chest heavily. Lucifer screamed, and his body flew back faster than when he came. The huge impact almost completely shattered his body. Fortunately, his body was abnormally strong, and the dark energy greatly neutralized the offensive power of the wind thundercloud force, thus saving his life. However, the tyrannical wind thundercloud force had already left a deep mark on his chest, from his right shoulder to his left lower abdomen. The deep mark was bursting with blood. Lucifer, a dignified fallen angel, was actually severely injured by Chi Yu in a single exchange. From the moment Chi Yu no longer concealed his energy to the moment he killed 39 black generals and heavily injured Lucifer, it all happened in a flash. Only then did the soldiers of the burning Hell Legion come to their senses. Surrounded by green flames, the burning legion pounced towards Chi Yu like ants. In front of Satan, no one would retreat. This was the characteristic of the burning Hell Legion. Chi Yu smiled. What he wanted to see the most was this scene. Returning power was his greatest advantage. Facing the burning legion, if it was someone else who was weaker, there was only the possibility of being devoured. However, would he be devoured? Like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, Chi Yu's body flashed, and he forcibly cut into the burning legion from the front. A circular black and silver light suddenly appeared and instantly expanded to a diameter of 2 meters in the air. It was like the Grim Reaper's scythe, instantly cutting down a piece of wheat in the burning legion. Kiran's mirror. Chi Yu had not used Kiran's treasure for a long time. At this moment it was perfect for him to use it. Kirin's illusion simulated a giant sword that was similar to Xuanyuan's godly sword in his right hand. He did not use any energy to attack. Just now, he had killed 39 black generals and Lucifer, which had consumed a certain amount of his energy. At this moment, what Qi Yu was using was a physical attack. He wanted to let Satan see what a human's battle technique was. With a flash of light, Qi Yu forcibly cut into the Burning Legion. The surrounding attacks of the Burning Legion seemed to have no effect on him. Stepping on Kirin, Qi Yu's body was like a wisp of smoke as he continuously shuttled through the crowd. He would not waste any energy at all. The giant Kirin was as light as an embroidery needle in his hands. The throat, no matter what kind of creature it was a vital point. The soldiers of the Burning Legion often felt a black shadow flash past in front of them, and their throats had already become ice-cold. Liquid surged out, and by the time they realized what had happened, their life force had already been drained away. Under the control of spiritual power, Kirin's mirror kept spinning. Even the Burning Legion, which had the strongest defense, could not use their bodies to block its advance. Harvesting lives, Qi Yu seemed to be a true citizen of hell. He was blasted back by Lucifer. In the short period of time since Satan had received him, hundreds of Burning Legion soldiers had already lost their lives. "All of you, get out of my way." Satan was angry. He had not been so angry in a long time. No matter who this guy was, he actually dared to kill his subordinates in front of him. He even ruined today's marriage. Shame, this was an absolute shame. Satan's voice caused the dust on the ground to tremble violently. After being repelled by the thundercloud force, a huge amount of dark energy appeared again, and this time, it was even more surging. Behind Satan's huge body, 12 black wings suddenly spread out. Under Satan's command, 12 black wings suddenly spread out. Each of them was more than 10 meters long, as if they could cover the sky. After receiving Satan's orders, the Burning Legion immediately started to disperse. As expected of Hell's most elite force, under Satan's command, the Burning Legion began to disperse. Under Satan's command, no one would hesitate at all. Qi Yu stood on the spot. With a bang, Kirin's mirror returned to his left forearm. A layer of black and silver light flowed on the huge earth shield, especially the huge Kirin's head. It looked so clear. The huge sword in his right hand pointed diagonally to the ground. Blood flowed along the blade and onto the ground of the central square. Although the Burning Legion had retreated, there were already a large number of corpses on the ground. Huge energy waves were constantly produced on his body. That was the energy of the source of nature. He was frantically absorbing the energy molecules in the air to replenish himself and offset the previous consumption. The reason why Qi Yu did not chase after the Burning Legion was because he felt an incomparably huge pressure. Satan's spiritual power had completely locked his body. In other words, Satan's peerless darkness had completely sealed off the entire central square. His eyes had already turned blood-red. He floated in the air and looked at the small figure of Qi Yu. His aura fluctuated unstably. Qi Yu smiled. Facing Satan, who was in a state of rage, he was the first person who could still smile. "Greetings, Your Majesty Satan. Or should I call you father-in-law?" Satan looked at the person in front of him. Under the full burst of his spiritual power, everything became clear. Qi Yu also did not imitate the dark energy. Satan immediately recognized that the guy in front of him did not belong to hell at all. He was a human, a real human. "Human, how did you come to this world? Don't you know that this world belongs to me?" After all, the king of hell was the king of hell. After the initial rage, he had already calmed down after hearing Qi Yu's voice. In this regard, Sana could not compare to his elder brother. Qi Yu shook his head and said, "Don't you understand? Your Majesty Satan, this is a very simple question. I wanted to come, so I came. In fact, you should thank me." Arrogance, absolute arrogance. Facing the huge pressure brought by Satan, Qi Yu did not show any weakness. The power of Kirin's source continued to spread. His body floated in the air, and a huge shadow of Kirin appeared out of thin air behind him. Compared to the huge Kirin that was more than 20 meters long, Chi Yu's figure no longer looked small. Kirin's shadow stepped on a four-colored auspicious cloud, and the horn on its head flickered with a dazzling brilliance. Looking at Chi Yu, the light in Ling Er's eyes changed. The panic and fear from before had completely disappeared, and all that was left was intoxication. This was a man. She did not make the wrong choice. Only such a man was worthy of her, and only such a man was worthy of her love. He was so powerful that even when facing her father, he did not have the slightest intention of backing down. Tenderness filled her heart. At this moment, Ling Er seemed to have forgotten about the crisis that Chi Yu was about to face. Satan raised his eyebrows slightly. "Oh? I have to thank you?" As he spoke, his attention had already shifted to the shadow of Kirin behind Chi Yu. He could not help but be secretly shocked because he could not figure out the strength of the other party. This situation had only occurred when he faced those so-called gods. In other words, the human in front of him had already reached the level of a god. How was this possible? With the fragile body of a human, how could it reach such a level? What was that illusory monster behind him? It did not seem to be a creature that belonged to a human. At this moment, this king of hell's heart was filled with intense doubts. Chi Yu revealed a matter-of-fact expression. "Of course you have to thank me. If the marriage contest had continued, you would have had to choose a son-in-law from among the 10 people. Now that I have helped you solve all your problems, you do not need to choose anymore. I am the only one left, so I should naturally be chosen as the son-in-law. Don't worry. I will definitely treat Ling Er well. As for the dowry, I will not ask for much. What do you think?" Satan laughed. He was so angry that he laughed. This human simply didn't know the difference between life and death. After killing so many of his subordinates, he still wanted to marry his daughter. "You are just a human? What right do you have to marry my daughter?" Satan stared coldly at Chi Yu. Chi Yu smiled slightly. "So what if I am a human? At least for now, humans are the most outstanding creatures in this world. Otherwise, why can a powerful existence like you only live in this plane of darkness? Humans control the core of this world. What about Earth?" His words hit Satan's sore spot. Satan's expression darkened. His eyes flickered as he looked at Chi Yu. The pressure in the air increased. At this moment, everyone was paying attention to the 2 people in the air. Chi Yu had already broken too many of Hell's rules. Just the fact that he was flying in the air now was enough to kill him 100 times. "You're from the human world. So you're the human that Lucifer and Ling Er mentioned before?" Satan was very smart. Satan was very smart. Otherwise, he would not have turned from an ordinary member of the Black General clan to the ruler of Hell. After calming himself down, he gradually understood Chi Yu's origins. Chi Yu smiled slightly. "That's right. Also, don't forget that I am your son-in-law. At least, in the contest just now I was the final victor. As for injuring Lord Lucifer and your subordinates from the Burning Legion, I was only defending myself. In any case, they could not be friends." Chi Yu was also very good at turning black into white. After all, he was a gangster. When it came to acting shamelessly, there was probably no one present who could compare to him. Satan turned his head abruptly. His red eyes focused on his daughter. Suddenly sensing her father's aura, Ling Er immediately became sluggish. She hurriedly lowered her head, not daring to look at Chi Yu's body. Satan understood that his daughter had long fallen in love with this human. Lucifer's judgment was wrong. Ling Er had already brought this human to hell. However, the strength that this human displayed was indeed strong enough. Satan smiled. This time, his smile looked very gentle. Even the huge amount of energy that was suppressing Chi Yu instantly retracted. Suddenly feeling his body become empty, Chi Yu almost spat out blood. Satan's strength was indeed much stronger than his. Under the situation where the two of them were facing each other, he could retract and release his strength freely. The feeling of using the wrong force made the shadow of Kirin behind Chi Yu look even more illusory. However, Chi Yu's reaction was also very fast. He was only affected for a moment. Under the adjustment of his own energy, he immediately returned to normal. So, you like Lung Er a lot? Satan looked at Chi Yu. His gaze had already become very calm. No one knew what he was thinking. Chi Yu was shocked. What a great demon king of hell. He could still control his emotions to such a degree at this time. He knew that he would definitely not be able to do it. However, he still nodded subconsciously and said, "Of course, I naturally like Lung Er. Lung Er is my woman. In this world, no one can snatch my woman away." Lung Er raised her head again. Her beautiful eyes were filled with a strange luster. Chi Yu had announced in front of all the hellish creatures in the core circle of hell that she was his woman. How wonderful this feeling was! Had he already admitted to her? Was he willing to be with her? Satan smiled and said indifferently, however, "Do you know that everything you did just now has already offended my dignity? In this world of hell, anyone who offends my dignity will only have one ending, no matter who it is." Chi Yu nodded his head and seriously replied, "I know. Of course I know. Offending Satan in hell will only result in one thing: death. However, this doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. I'm just working hard to marry your daughter, isn't that right? Father-in-law Satan." The smile on Satan's face became even wider. Good, good, good. You really are a brave young man. For humans to have such an outstanding talent like you, it's no wonder that they can rule over Earth. Although you offended my dignity today, I can forgive you on account of the fact that you are pursuing my daughter. I can also treat everything that happened just now as if nothing had happened. I can even agree to marry my daughter to you. This time, it was Chi Yu's turn to be dumbfounded. He looked at Satan and his pupils constricted continuously. Is this even possible? Is Satan really that easy to talk to? Chi Yu's heart couldn't help but become even more heavy. Of course, Satan wouldn't be so easy to talk to. However, he had actually disregarded his own dignity and said such words in front of so many of his clansmen. This showed how scheming he was. Everything he said was obviously full of temptation. However, the twist after that was something that Luo Yunyang couldn't bear. But I know that one of your conditions is for me to become your subordinate," Chi Yu said indifferently. Satan smiled and shook his head. "No, of course not. If you become my son-in-law, you will be my relative, just like Lung Er. How can you be my subordinate? You should also be able to see that only the world of hell is the most suitable place for me to live. Under the cover of the purple sun, I will become the strongest person in this world. The earth is not suitable for me to live in. However, when my burning legion descends upon the human world and unifies the earth, since you are a human, I will let you be the king of the earth. How about it?" Beautiful women and power were all things that ordinary people hoped to obtain the most. The king of the earth, the princess of hell, these were all tempting conditions. Chi Yu finally understood why the fallen angel Lucifer would seek refuge with Satan. In a sense, Satan was definitely a formidable person in the world. Compared to the impulsive Satan, he was definitely stronger. Lung Er's eyes were filled with anticipation as she looked at Chi Yu in the sky. Although she knew that it was almost impossible for Chi Yu to agree, she still hoped for a miracle to happen. Chapter 299. Although they were enemies, Satan's words made Chi Yu feel much better about him. He nodded gently and said, "Your Majesty Satan, you are indeed a wise monarch. Unfortunately, I have offended your dignity today. At the same time, I am a human, and I have no desire for power. If you are willing to marry Lung Er to me, if you really want Lung Er to be happy, then cancel your idea of attacking the human world. In that case, you will be my most respected father-in-law." Satan's face changed, and he said coldly, "What if I don't?" Chi Yu said without hesitation, "Then we are enemies, enemies who will not stop until one of us dies." Satan snorted and laughed. "Good, you are indeed the man that Lung-Er likes. Under the temptation of power you can actually not compromise. Lung-Er did not misjudge you. Unfortunately, you have chosen to be my enemy. I am determined to get the earth. No matter who it is, as long as they stand in my way, then they can only die." The huge pressure appeared again. Compared to before, the pressure this time was doubled. The purple sun in the sky became unprecedentedly bright, and the huge dark energy shrouded Satan's body. Chi Yu could clearly feel that the 12 wings behind Satan were crazily absorbing the dark energy. The huge pressure seemed to cover the sky and the sun. In the face of such a huge energy, any technique would become a joke. Even the entire space was blocked by Satan. There was no other way but to confront it head-on. In the face of Satan, the light in Chi Yu's eyes became extremely persistent. His body flashed alternately with 4 colors of light. The 4 colors of light that belonged to his thundercloud force flashed every time. A layer of gentle or overbearing energy fluctuation appeared, forcibly breaking the huge pressure that shrouded him. Although Satan's energy was extremely strong, it was impossible for him to overwhelm Chi Yu with pressure. Lucifer stood on the platform. The blood on his body had stopped flowing, but his face became extremely pale. However, his face was abnormally pale. He had never imagined that Chi Yu would become so powerful in such a short period of time. Even after losing the Xianyuan sword, he was still able to injure him in a single move. Chi Yu's control over energy was simply too frightening. He was actually able to hide compressed wind attribute energy within such a dense ball of lightning. This was the first time Lucifer had seen such an attack. That was why he had suffered such a huge loss in the first exchange. A dark red light filled the entire horizon. Only the light of the purple sun could penetrate it. It enveloped Satan's body and completely dyed this great demonic god purple. There was a huge energy wave. It was effortless for him to maintain such great pressure. Satan's mental power was completely locked onto Chi Yu's body. As long as he showed the slightest sign of being unable to hold on, he would immediately be attacked by Satan. At their level of battle, as long as one side had the upper hand, it would be difficult to change the situation. Satan was cautious. Even if he knew that the opponent's overall strength was not as good as his, he did not have the slightest bit of carelessness. This was also something that Sana could not compare to. Satan's energy aura was flawless. Chi Yu floated proudly in front of him. While constantly searching, he also raised his own energy to fight against Satan's increasing pressure. The two of them floated in the air. Behind Satan was an endless dark red sea, while behind Chi Yu, the huge ink kirin was constantly flashing, forming a sharp contrast. Although Chi Yu's energy light looked weaker, it did not show any signs of weakening. As Satan's energy increased, his energy also continued to increase. The confrontation made Chi Yu understand a truth. Under the cover of the purple sun, Satan's recovery speed would definitely not be slower than his. After all, this was the Hell world, a world that belonged to him. Under the huge pressure between them, the air about 100 meters between Chi Yu and Satan had become solid. It was solid. That was the solidification caused by the huge energy fluctuations. Their strength was too strong. This was going to be a true God-level battle. The difference in philosophy made it inevitable that they would fight. No one spoke, and their spiritual power was firmly locked on their opponent. The Hell creatures in the core circle of Hell, who were watching the battle, did not even dare to breathe. In such a battle, no one could intervene, not even a strong person like Lucifer. Retreat. Chi Yu and Satan made the same action almost at the same time. The energy density between the two of them was too high. It was impossible to launch an attack. Therefore, at that moment they both chose to retreat. Dark red flames burned on Satan's body. With the experience of fighting with Sanaa, Chi-Yu knew that Satan's ability was also a combination of darkness and fire. However, Sanaa's fire attribute energy mainly came from the magma, while Satan's fire attribute energy came from the purple sun in the sky. The difference between them was obvious. It was not a battle of the same level. Wind, green wind, began to spin behind Chi-Yu. In an instant, the Kirin shadow behind him had completely turned green. It let out a powerful roar and suddenly integrated into the green wind. Chi-Yu floated there calmly. The pair of wings on his back had already become 3 pairs. The pure gold armor covered his whole body, forming a sharp contrast with the black armor on Satan's body. Every time a huge energy fluctuation appeared, the confrontation between them became a little more intense. The 12 wings on Satan's back shot out a blade-like light at the same time. They quickly assembled in front of him, forming a huge blade net. The surging energy stopped in the air. With every second, its volume and energy fluctuation increased greatly. A tornado appeared. It was hundreds of meters tall, almost connecting the sky and the earth. The diameter of the center was more than 50 meters. Such a huge amount of wind attribute energy rarely appeared in Hell. However, with the help of Chi-Yu's 8-cloud-level thundercloud force and natural source energy, it appeared easily. Moreover, this was just the beginning. Chi-Yu roared towards the sky. His body shone with green light. The huge tornado swayed and moved forward. Behind it, a series of afterimages appeared. No, they were not afterimages. They were real entities. It happened in an instant. Behind the giant tornado, 9 smaller tornadoes appeared. They formed a giant barrier around the largest tornado and headed towards Sandan. They rushed towards Satan. Mother and child tornado, the strongest area attack of the wind attribute energy. In the Kirin clan, only the strongest wind Kirin could use this super ability. At this moment, it appeared in Chi-Yu's hands. A green tornado. It completely merged the sand and stones on the ground into it. It covered the sky and flashed past Chi-Yu. It seemed to be moving very slowly, but it only took an instant for it to arrive in front of Satan. A huge amount of wind energy fluctuated. It caused the surrounding air to become extremely chaotic. Even with Satan's strength, he couldn't help but be shocked. Chi-Yu's ability was much stronger than he had imagined. 12 pieces of black energy floated out. Each of them was in the shape of a fan. Amidst the ear-piercing sound of friction, 9 small tornadoes appeared in front of the 9 fan-shaped black energy. They were actually cut open from the middle. For a moment, sand and stones flew everywhere, dyeing the entire space. The largest tornado was also completely strangled by the last 3 fan-shaped dark energies. The wind disappeared, but it was still blowing, causing Chi-Yu and Satan's bodies to sway slightly. In fact, it wasn't the effect of the wind. It was the collision of energy between them. It was a tie. It was a tie. The hell creatures in the core circle of hell were in an uproar. From their great leader, Satan, they already knew that the one fighting against Satan was a human. However, this human was actually able to fight to a tie with their great king. In fact, Chi-Yu knew that it was a tie on the surface. Although it seemed like a tie on the surface, he had consumed much more energy than Satan. If Satan hadn't been so cautious, he would have been at a disadvantage just now. Satan said calmly, "Not bad. Your control of the wind has reached the level where you can do whatever you want. However, perhaps you still don't know that darkness is a great energy that can devour all elemental energy. In front of me, even if your control of the wind is more profound, it won't have any effect." Chi-Yu didn't say anything, because he needed to focus more on condensing energy. The source of nature in his body was already in a saturated state, recovering his energy at the fastest speed possible. Every time a huge energy fluctuation appeared, Chi-Yu's body would sway slightly. After all, although the dark energy had been filtered, it was much more violent than the energy molecules of other attributes. This was especially so after the first collision of energy between the two of them. Now, it had become very difficult to absorb the energy molecules in the air. Looking at the golden armor on Chi-Yu's body, Satan said, "You are no match for me. I will give you another chance. Either marry my daughter, stay in the hell world, and wait for the day to come to conquer Earth with me. Or, today will be the day you die." Chi-Yu smiled. "In that case, I really want to see how His Majesty Satan will kill his son-in-law." With a flash, Chi-Yu moved again. This time, the energy that appeared on his body was blue, a gentle blue. The water thundercloud force surged out, forming ripples in the air. The huge energy fluctuations seemed to make the air moist. Satan's expression became much more serious. Since Chi-Yu had appeared, he had already displayed 3 different types of energy. It should be known that he could only display 2 types of energy, darkness and fire. In terms of talent, he knew that this human in front of him was even better than him. However, he was really too young. Otherwise, if he had the same lifespan as Satan, there would be no need to continue today's battle at all. The water thundercloud force floated out, forming a water curtain. Then, wrapped by the water thundercloud force, dazzling blue light balls appeared. They were also blue, but they were a combination of gentleness and violence. The water thundercloud force and the thundercloud force complemented each other. One could clearly see that the ball lightning wrapped by the water thundercloud force was constantly fluctuating. The huge energy formed a water and thunder hell in front of Chi-Yu in the blink of an eye. This time, Satan's expression really changed. Of course, he knew the power of the ball lightning. The only place in the hell that he did not dare to go was the demonic canyon. That was a smooth road to the human world, and at the same time, the most terrifying place in the hell. Satan did not dare to wait for Chi-Yu to condense his energy. His body suddenly floated forward, and in the blink of an eye, he had already entered the range of the water and thunder. A layer of dark red energy turned into sharp needles in the air. Under the precise control of Satan's mental strength, the needles searched for the water and thunder. Boom! A violent boom appeared in the air. Chi-Yu groaned and his body suddenly retreated. The water and thunder hell had consumed a lot of his energy, but the effect was not as good as he had imagined. Although it tore apart the dark energy connection between Satan and the purple sun, the righteousness of the thundercloud force did not cause real harm to Satan. Perhaps this was because the thundercloud force had not broken through to the true 9th cloud. A huge black figure suddenly appeared in front of Chi-Yu. It was instant teleportation. The instant teleportation that belonged to a demon king came without any warning. The huge 12 wings wrapped around Chi-Yu in an instant. At the same time, Satan's hand was in front of Chi-Yu. Thunder, fire, water, wind. The 4 types of thundercloud force, thunder, fire, water, and wind, under the ingenious combination of Chi-Yu, burst out waves of tyrannical energy fluctuations. They constantly clashed with Satan in the air, causing him to be unable to retract his 12 wings and trap himself. At the same time, the energy between them increased more and more intensely. The ground of the central square had already begun to show deep ravines. Once the energy that occasionally leaked out entered the core circle of the hell, it immediately turned the area it enveloped into a true hell. At this time, under the situation of attacking the opponent with all his strength, even Satan could not control this situation from happening. Satan's energy was too powerful. Every attack was filled with infinite pressure. The air seemed to be a part of his body. All kinds of feelings of losing his center of gravity constantly attacked Chi-Yu's body, causing him to be unable to exert his attack power to the greatest extent. Golden light constantly surged, and Kiran's illusion appeared again. It crossed its huge sword and blocked Satan's fist. The energy of Kiran's arm suddenly erupted. In a deafening roar, the black and gold figures suddenly separated. A white mark was left on Satan's fist, while Chi-Yu's Kiran's illusion had broken. Even the energy of Kiran's illusion had been shattered by Satan's fist. At the very least, it could not be used again in this current battle. Floating in the air, Chi-Yu gasped for breath. In this short period of hand-to-hand combat, he had already used all his strength. Satan's dark energy was full of destructive aura. Only a small part of it had entered his body, but it had already caused all the meridians in Chi-Yu's body to be on the verge of exploding at any time. Under the effect of the natural source, it was barely resolved. Blood flowed down the corner of Chi-Yu's mouth. His gaze was still firm, but the energy fluctuations around his body had become more unstable than before. Satan looked the same as before. He slowly retracted his right hand, a murderous intent constantly flickering in his eyes. It had been a long time since he had met an opponent that could compete with him. This was just a human. However, his strength was far beyond his imagination. Dark red energy condensed in the air, and the 12 wings on Satan's back erupted with dark red energy at the same time, causing the wings to expand in a state of energy. Each wing expanded to a length of 100 meters, and every time it flapped, it would bring about a hurricane of dark energy. This was Satan's true strength. The armor on his body had now completely turned blood red. His ferocious face and the demonic horns on his head were all emitting incomparably strong energy fluctuations. A pure black energy ball appeared between Satan's huge hands. His hands had appeared in front of him with his palms clasped together, and as the black energy ball appeared, they gradually separated. Black. It was a sparkling black, incomparably pure black. At the very least, Chi-Yu had never seen such a black color before. It was a feeling that could not be resisted. There was no other energy mixed in. It was just pure darkness. Chi-Yu knew that this was the energy of Satan's natural source. What he wanted to do now was to destroy himself. Looking at the energy fluctuations in Satan's hands, Chi-Yu smiled. He seemed to have given up resisting, and the energy fluctuations around his body had clearly become much weaker. Perhaps some people would ask why he didn't use the infinite change 4 stars realm technique. Actually, it wasn't that Chi-Yu didn't want to use it. It was that he didn't have a chance at all. At the same time, facing an opponent like Satan, the infinite change 4 stars realm technique couldn't unleash its intended effect. As long as Chi-Yu and Satan clashed at full force, the infinite change 4 stars realm technique would immediately break. After all, Chi-Yu's current strength had already far surpassed that of Wen-Ting's father, who had created Kirin-In. Unless he could truly reach the 9 clouds and refine Kirin-In again, when facing an opponent of the same level, the infinite change 4 stars realm technique could no longer create miracles. Satan looked coldly at Chi-Yu. He would no longer give this human any chance. Although the black energy ball in his hands looked very small, it was a black hole that Satan had created using his own energy. It was a black hole that could devour everything. Even with his strength, he could only control it so much. This was because he had already lost too much face in front of his own people in order to subdue Chi-Yu. Now, if he wanted to regain his lost face, he had to destroy Chi-Yu in the shortest time possible. Therefore, Satan didn't hesitate to use up his energy to use his most powerful attack. Go to hell, kid. On this day next year, it will be the anniversary of your death. The black energy ball appeared. Like a maggot in a rotten bone, it appeared in front of Chi-Yu. It was on the ground. Energy was transferred instantly, and there was no process of flight. When it left Satan's hands, it was already in front of Chi-Yu. An illusory, distorted black hole appeared. An enormous suction force and irresistible energy appeared around Chi-Yu's body. Chi-Yu even felt that his body was shrinking, while the black hole in front of him was expanding. He knew that if he was really sucked in, he would immediately be crushed to pieces. Not even a scrap would be left. At this critical juncture, a 5-colored energy light appeared. Even the Hell Realm couldn't escape from the 5 element. In that instant, Chi-Yu's body became illusory in front of the illusory black hole. The black hole's suction force stopped, and Chi Yu's body returned to its original size. Satan stared at everything in front of him, dumbstruck. He couldn't believe that this was real. The black hole actually didn't attack his opponent under the control of his mental strength? How was this possible? Actually, it wasn't that the black hole didn't want to attack, but that it couldn't find a target to attack. Under the effect of the Kongtong Seal's undying domain, the current Chi Yu's body shape was very similar to the black hole's. Therefore, the black hole also thought that he was the same kind, and that he wasn't a destructive energy. Since there was nothing in front of it, what else could it devour? Cold sweat instantly appeared on every part of Chi Yu's body. At this moment, he finally understood why the Eastern world didn't have gods and demons like the Western world, and only left behind 10 divine weapons. The 10 great divine weapons were indeed worthy of being called the 10 great divine weapons. Even the Kongtong Seal, which was ranked at the bottom, could erupt with such a powerful effect at this critical moment. Satan's attack was something he hadn't expected. If the Kongtong Seal's undying domain hadn't erupted on its own, he would probably be dead by now. Not only had the Kongtong Seal helped him defeat powerful enemies several times, but it had also saved his life several times. In front of him was a black hole. Chi Yu and the incomparably dark energy stared at each other. Although it wasn't a true black hole, its offensive power was too terrifying. Even when he had the Xianyuan sword, Chi Yu wasn't confident that he could deal with such an attack. However, the Kongtong Seal's undying domain just so happened to restrain it. A strange smile appeared in Chi Yu's eyes. His illusory body moved, and in an instant, it actually wrapped around the terrifying black hole. Before Satan could react, the spiritual link between him and the black hole was forcibly severed by Chi Yu. A greenish-gray light appeared around Chi Yu's body, and in the next moment, a green wind drifted out. Chi Yu couldn't teleport energy like Satan, but under the full force of his thundercloud force, the green light's speed was no different from teleportation. No! Satan roared and suddenly rushed in the direction of the green light. However, what greeted him was Chi Yu's fist, which was flickering with black and silver light. Lin Bing Doja formation, Lin Bing Doja. Kiran's arm, Skybreaker. Satan was going crazy. Even when faced with the full force of Kiran's arm, the huge dark energy couldn't stop him. Chi Yu's body was sent flying, drawing a beautiful arc in the air. Blood spurted out. Satan was in a berserk state, and he had used all his strength. He used all his strength, and did not even care about the cracks on the armor on his chest that had been shaken by Chi Yu. Kiran's arm, Skybreaker. Another shout rang out, but this time, the voice wasn't as domineering as Chi Yu's. A silver figure appeared in front of Satan in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, it was still Chi Yu, but this time, it was a silver Chi Yu. The energy wave wasn't any different from before. The 8-cloud super ink Kiran's arm, wasn't that easy to resist. Even Satan couldn't move forward in the face of such an attack. The silver and black fists collided in the air, but this time there was no sound. The silver figure disappeared, and the black figure also retreated in the huge shock. Satan stared at Chi Yu, who was floating in the air in the distance and was covered in golden armor. He didn't understand what happened just now. Blood also flowed from the corner of his mouth. The black armor on his right arm had been completely broken by the 2 powerful attacks of Kiran's arm. The Lord of Hell, the great demon king, Satan, was injured. Of course, Satan didn't understand what was going on. Doppelganger domain. It was the first time Chi Yu used doppelganger domain. Although the appearance of the doppelganger was exactly the same as his real body, the soul was Wenting's. With Chi Yu's current strength, he could only maintain doppelganger domain for a short period of time. Therefore, Wenting only attacked once, but this explosion was enough for the current situation. The cyan light ball. It flew to the sky above the core circle of hell. Under the surprised gaze of the hell creatures, the cyan appearance disappeared, revealing a ferocious black color. The black energy ball didn't look very big. Under the astonished gazes of the hellish creatures, the most terrifying killing machine created by Satan exploded. There was no loud noise, no monstrous momentum, but the silent fear was even more terrifying. One moment, it was that short moment. 1/5 of the entire core circle of hell disappeared. A huge gap appeared in the core circle of hell. It disappeared so cleanly that only a deep circular hole was left on the ground. Devour. The terrifying devouring of the black hole only lasted for a moment, but it had already devoured 1/5 of the core circle of hell. The buildings were devoured, the hell creatures in that area were devoured, and even the soil was devoured. Satan was stunned, and so was Chi-Yu. No one had expected that the black hole could produce such terrifying energy. It should be known that a large number of hell creatures from all over the world had gathered in the core circle of hell, and in 1/5 of the core circle of hell, there were at least millions of hell creatures, and this was the lowest estimate. This eruption actually led to the extinction of dozens of small races in the infernal realm. This was something Chi-Yu had not expected. Satan looked at his own hand. Even he found it hard to believe that the black hole would be so powerful. In truth, he did not know that the bold Chi-Yu had used the energy of the origin of nature to forcefully compress the black hole before sending it out. Although it was only a tenth of the black hole's size, this tenth had increased the black hole's power by several times. However, Chi-Yu was not having a good time either. The black hole's power had been compressed by more than 1/3 in an instant. If it wasn't for the undying domain, he would have been dead by now. Father-in-law, you can't blame me for this. I'm just getting rid of a hot potato. How could the word cool describe it? He hadn't killed many hell creatures even after spending so much effort, but the black hole attack this time had destroyed 1/5 of hell's core circle. If there were a few more attacks, or if another black hole like that fell into the dense burning legion, Satan's goal of conquering Earth would be over without him having to do anything. Satan raised his head and looked at Chi-Yu in a completely different light. Every bone in his body was cracking, and no one knew what he was feeling right now. Destroy, destroy. Human, you destroyed my years of hard work. You destroyed the core circle of hell. Do you know what this will bring to the human race? Chi-Yu was shocked, but he was not afraid. No matter what it means, it won't be easy for hell to move unhindered in the human world. There will be countless powerful forces in front of you. Satan's voice was filled with silence. Death, in the process of conquering, I will make hundreds of humans pay for what you have done today. Of course, the only ending for you now is death. No, I won't let you die. Death is too easy for you. I will let you suffer endless pain and give you endless life. I will let you enjoy that wonderful feeling forever. Chi-Yu had basically achieved his goal. He had never thought of using his own strength to destroy all the hell creatures here. That was unrealistic. He was already very lucky to be able to borrow Satan's strength to destroy 1/5 of the core circle of hell. That attack could be said to be a joint effort between him and Satan. Otherwise, it wouldn't have produced such a terrifying effect. Father-in-law, it seems that the misunderstanding between us is still too deep. I have to go. Since you insist on going to Earth, then fine. I will wait for your arrival on Earth. When the time comes, don't blame me for going against my superiors. You want to leave? Satan moved. With his expanded body and 12 100-meter wings, he arrived in front of Chi-Yu in an instant. His huge fist directly bombarded Chi-Yu's chest. 5 colored energy waves appeared again. Undying domain, absolute undying. Chi-Yu took the punch with a smile on his face. His body turned into a ball of energy and flew away like a cannonball. Satan was about to give chase when 5 dragons of different colors appeared in front of him without warning. The energy of the 5 elements condensed in an instant, and a huge energy wave collided with Satan's body. In terms of body size, he didn't have any advantage against the 5 elements divine dragons. Satan was already injured, and it would take a long time to get rid of the 5 elements divine dragons. The appearance of the 5 elements divine dragons also completely cut off his spiritual lock on Chi-Yu. Chapter 300. Chi-Yu's figure disappeared along with his voice, and in the core circle of hell, a dazzling display of blood-red fireworks erupted. The lightning beads buried in the bodies of the black generals were detonated by Chi-Yu at the same time. What was the effect? They were like human bombs. The spectators were so densely packed. What was the result of 5,000 human bombs exploding? Of course, the effect was definitely not as good as that of the black hole before, but the number of hell creatures that died directly reached 6-digit. Chi-Yu left, the 5 elements divine dragon was finally dealt with by Satan, but he also lost the possibility of chasing after Chi-Yu. The core circle of hell had completely fallen into a state of panic, and the energy on Satan's body fluctuated unstably like never before. The Burning Legion did not move. Panic would not appear in the Burning Legion. They were all looking at their great leader, the great demon king Satan, waiting for his orders. Satan roared and spat out a mist of blood from his mouth. At the same time, the energy around his body converged, and he instantly flew towards the peak of the Demon King Fortress. His furious voice suddenly sounded out, "Stabilize the core circle of hell, kill anyone who dares to cause trouble. Salem is imprisoned in the abyss of hell, and no one is allowed to let her out without my orders. Lucifer will personally supervise her." Satan did not chase after Chi-Yu, because he knew that it was impossible for him to catch up at all. Without the mental lock, even with his strength, it was impossible for him to catch up with a human of similar strength. Send people to chase after him? How could that be possible? Although Chi-Yu was injured, even if Lucifer chased after him, the result would not be good. But even if Lucifer chased after them, there wouldn't be any good result. Satan could no longer afford any more losses. In the end, Satan vomited blood again, but it was not because of Chi-Yu, the determined great demon king of hell. He was really angry. After this incident, he knew that his reputation in hell had suffered an unprecedented blow. Langere looked into the distance, her infatuated gaze completely fixed in the direction where Chi-Yu had left. At this moment, even she did not know what she was feeling. From the perspective of hell, she should hate him, but she did not know why. She just couldn't bring herself to hate him. His heroic appearance when he fought against his father, the ruler of hell, was imprinted in the deepest part of his mind. In any case, he had solved the problem of finding a spouse. Imprisoned. His father had been imprisoned because of him. Chi-Yu, will you come again? Even Lucifer couldn't help but be moved by her sorrowful gaze. He sighed and said, "Your Highness, let's go." His Majesty was also angry for a while. That's why he made such a decision. I believe he'll release you soon. You and that man are no longer possible. He's already our greatest enemy in hell. Langere shook her head and said nothing. Under the escort of Lucifer, she quietly left the highest platform of Demon King Castle. He spat out another mouthful of blood. Kiran concealed Chi-Yu's aura completely and landed on the ground. Chi-Yu's breathing became more intense. In the last head-on collision to stop Satan, his body was once again eroded by Satan's violent dark energy. At that time, Satan had already seen through Chi-Yu's goal. In order to stop him, he had already erupted with all his energy. Chi-Yu's right arm was now comminuted, and Kiran's arm was still seriously injured in the face of Satan's all-out attack. At the same time, Chi-Yu's body was also filled with raging dark energy, so he had to stop and adjust. Satan was indeed strong. Even with his strength, he still lost in the end. Of course, if the overall effect was considered, he was the one who had the last laugh. However, at this time, Chi-Yu's mood was a little heavy. It was not because of the injury he had suffered. Although the injury was serious, he was famous for his life. It was not easy for him to die even if he wanted to. With the various thundercloud force in his body, although the dark energy was strong, thundercloud force could dispel his dark attribute. The other kinds of thundercloud force could dispel it with the help of the origin of nature. In addition, with the powerful healing ability of the water thundercloud force and the origin of nature, even if the injury was more serious, he was confident that he could recover in a short time. The reason why he was in a bad mood was mainly because of Ling'er. He knew that the huge loss in the core circle of hell this time would definitely make Satan reach the peak of anger, and he would inevitably vent his anger on Ling'er. Now he just hoped that Ling'er would not make things too difficult for Ling'er because she was his only daughter. Although Chi-Yu had thought about taking Ling'er with him, he knew that it would not be a good result for him and Ling'er. Not to mention whether he could take Ling'er away in front of Satan, even if he really let Ling'er go with him. He was afraid that she would not be happy. After all, Satan was her father. Moreover, in the near future, he was afraid that there would be an even more intense collision between him and Satan. Rather than feeling more pain because of the deepening relationship between him and Ling'er, it was better to just have a one-night marriage. After all, the difference between their camps was too great. Ling'er, I hope you can be happy. If hell can stop invading Earth, no matter how tyrannical your father is, I will definitely snatch you back. Chi-Yu's thoughts stopped at this point. His willpower had long since matured through constant tempering. Although emotions were the easiest to cause fluctuations in one's state of mind, the current Chi-Yu was able to control his emotions in the shortest amount of time possible and put all of his focus into healing. After all, this was hell. Without his peak strength, once he encountered a furious Satan, the consequences could be imagined. Chi-Yu knew that Satan would not let him go so easily. At least, he was still in hell. Sana knew how to return to Earth, and Satan even more so. Perhaps, he was already looking for his whereabouts. Kirin was invisible on his body, and Chi-Yu completely entered the invisible state of cultivation. The 4 kinds of thundercloud force flowed in his body at the same time. The thundercloud force in the form of spherical lightning was indeed powerful. Bit by bit, it reoccupied the meridians eroded by the dark energy, and the water thundercloud force also played a healing role. The fracture of his right arm was not a big problem, at least for someone like Chi-Yu who had an abnormal recovery ability. Satan sat in the highest room of his Demon King castle, and the anger in his heart had reached its peak. The appearance of Chi-Yu not only made him lose face. At the same time, it also brought a devastating blow to the entire Dark General's clan. At that time, he was able to suppress his anger and agree to the marriage between Ling'er and Chi-Yu. He also agreed to let him become the King of Earth because he saw that Chi-Yu could even be compared to the entire Dark General's clan. If he could assist Ling'er in the future when his ability reached the void-breaking realm, he could leave this world without worry. But he did not expect Chi-Yu to be so powerful and insidious, and the final outcome turned out to be like this. The destruction of the core circle of hell could be said to have caused a huge gap in his authority. Although nothing would happen with the prestige he had accumulated in the past, but, in the hearts of the people of hell, his position would inevitably be greatly affected. Chi-Yu, that human was called Chi-Yu, and he was the most powerful existence among humans. He really was strong. The aura of Satan's whole body fluctuated unstably again, and he clasped his hands in front of his chest. A purple ball of light floated in front of him, and dark energy filled the entire room. The purple ball of light lit up by the dark energy, and the purple sun in the sky and the purple ball of light in front of him were completely united. A huge amount of dark energy entered Satan's body, healing the injuries of his body. Chi-Yu's energy also invaded his body. Regarding the power of Kirin's arm, all he could feel was the word domineering. Coupled with anger attacking his heart, although Satan's injuries were not as serious as those of Chi-Yu. But it was not good. How many years had it been? Even when he was dealing with his younger brother, Sanao, he had not been injured. But this time, he was injured by the hands of a human. To Satan, this was definitely a great humiliation. Sanaa, thinking of Sanaa. Satan's heart suddenly moved, and his angry heart gradually calmed down. This human was obviously brought here by Lingere. This girl actually did not tell him, so it could be seen that she had fallen in love with this human. However, although it was easy for this human to come, it would probably be difficult for him to go back. Judging from his strength, it was impossible for him to return to Earth through other passages, and wasn't the only passage that could allow him to return above the 10,000 Demons Canyon? That was also the passage that he had been waiting for to open. However, wanting to leave from there was easier said than done. He had worked hard for so many years, but he had not succeeded, not to mention that his strength was inferior to his. Since he could not leave hell, then he had a chance to take revenge for everything that he had brought today. Thinking of this, Satan's eyes revealed deep hatred. Towards Chiyu, he only had the thought of destroying him. No, that's not right. Satan's body suddenly trembled. That human seemed to have very strong lightning energy. Moreover, his own situation was different from the people of hell. He did not have dark energy, which meant that he was not afraid of the atmospheric morality in the lightning. Moreover, his own energy seemed to be ball lightning. What if he could withstand lightning? Then, it was very likely that he would enter the passage. Thinking of this, Satan's expression suddenly changed. If he let this brat escape from hell just like that, then where would his face go? Standing up, Satan's expression kept changing. Sanaa was also there. That day was coming. It was also time to solve this problem. And that human, whether or not he knew the way to return to Earth, he would find out sooner or later. Since that was the case, he would definitely go to the 10,000 Demons Canyon. The door opened, and a servant said respectfully, "Your Majesty, what are your orders?" He obviously knew that Satan was in a bad mood, so his respectful manner was absolutely impeccable. Satan said in a deep voice, "Call Lucifer and the 3 Dreadlords here. At the same time, order the Burning Legion's 1st Regiment to be ready to move at any time and await my orders." "Yes, Your Majesty." Satan muttered to himself, "Brat, your injuries are even more serious than mine. Even if you know that you can leave the 10,000 Demons Canyon, it definitely won't be that easy. When you reach the 10,000 Demons Canyon, what awaits you will be the arrival of destruction." The Abyss of Demons was a place in hell specially used to imprison criminals. It was absolutely dark here, and only those who had reached a certain level of strength could use their spiritual power to see everything around them. The abyss was 3,000 meters underground, and it was heavily guarded. Anyone who violated Satan's order and didn't deserve to die would be imprisoned in this prison. The Burning Legion's army was guarding outside. After this place was built, no one had been able to escape. At this time, Lucifer was comforting Lingere in the Abyss of Demons. He had watched Lingere grow up, and for so many years, he had always been Lingere's guardian angel. Although he was angry because of Chiyu, he did not want Lingere to be hurt. "Uncle Lucifer, where do you think Chiyu could go?" Lingere's mood had already calmed down a lot. Lucifer said, "He definitely wants to go back to Earth. As for what he will do, I don't know. However, with his ability, I think he should know where the path back to Earth is. However, whether he can go back or not is a big problem. Your Highness, forget about this human. His Majesty will not let him go. You've also seen how great of a loss he brought to our hell today." Lingere smiled bitterly and said, "If I could forget him so easily, I would not have brought him to hell. I originally wanted to stay with him in hell. However, he did not descend with me to the Demon King's castle. I did not expect his ethnic background to be so heavy. So many things had happened today. Perhaps Dad would not forgive me anymore. After all, I was the one who brought him here." Lucifer shook his head and said with a smile, "Don't you know His Majesty's temper? You are his only daughter and his only family. How could he not forgive you? It's just that His Majesty is still angry now. After a few days, when his anger subsides, everything will naturally return to normal. There is no overnight hatred between father and daughter. At this moment, a member of the Burning Legion ran over and shouted from 100 meters away from the abyss, "Lord Lucifer, His Majesty invites you." Lucifer was a little surprised and said, "What's going on? Do you know what's going on?" Hearing Satan's order from the Burning Legion, he could not help but feel a little nervous. After all, he had seen Satan's rage very clearly. At this time, he did not want to become the target of Satan's anger. The Burning Legion soldier said, "I don't know what it is. However, His Majesty invited you and the 3 dreadlords to go together." At the same time, he also mobilized the 1st Regiment of the Legion, saying that they are ready to go. It seems like there is a mission to carry out. Lucifer's heart moved and he said to himself, "Mission? Could it be that they have found the kid's whereabouts? Oh, I understand. His Majesty must have thought that the kid would have to go to the Canyon of 10,000 Demons if he wants to leave. This time, he is probably setting up an inescapable trap. Langare, rest well here. I'll go first." As he said that, he floated up and left the abyss with the soldier. As the saying goes, the speaker may not mean it, but the listener is interested. Lucifer's words immediately attracted Langare's attention. Langare's delicate body trembled slightly, but she did not say anything. However, as she lowered her head, her pink eyes revealed a resolute light. Chi Yu's training this time lasted for 2 whole days. After all, he had injured his tendons and bones. Although it only took a few hours for his fractured right arm to recover, it took him a whole day to make the energy flow smoothly again. The dark energy had been completely dispersed, and his various thundercloud force had also returned to normal. As for the 2nd day of training, it was time for him to fully experience the battle with Satan. Every time Chi Yu faced an opponent stronger than him, his potential would be stimulated to a certain extent after he fell into a dead end. Although his current strength had already reached the peak state, it was already very difficult for him to improve further. However, the improvement of thundercloud force made him understand that he still had a good chance of reaching the true 9-cloud level. And the hard work of training now was to lay a good foundation for future improvement. He just did not know where to find the energy to improve the 3 attributes of thundercloud force. He floated up. Chi Yu felt that the energy in his body had become more condensed. It was time to go back. This time, he had been in hell for close to 10 days. He did not know how long it would take to fly back home after returning to Earth. When he thought of his brothers, companions, and confidants, Chi Yu could not help but feel anxious to return home. After all, hell did not belong to him. The feeling here was not very good. He spread his black wings, and in order to not attract attention, he still activated Qilin concealment and flew up into the air. He flew in the direction of the Canyon of Demons. On the way to the core circle of hell, Chi Yu deliberately remembered the location of the Canyon of Demons. That was his only way back. In order to return to Earth as soon as possible, Chi Yu flew at the maximum speed. This time, he arrived at the Canyon of Demons. He also had to fulfill his promise to Sanaa to create more trouble for Satan. At that time, even if Satan wanted to invade Earth, he was afraid that his own strength would be consumed in the hell world. For every hellish creature that died. For Earth, it would be safer. After a day of flying, under the illumination of the purple sun, Chi Yu could already sense the aura of lightning in the myriad demon valley from afar, even though there was no one to trigger it. Although no one triggered the lightning, this was the place where the dark energy in the entire hell world was the weakest. Perhaps it was for this reason that Sanaa had been trapped for so long, but still had not reached the level of Satan. While flying, Chi Yu suddenly felt that something was wrong. He had always been cautious, and when flying, he would spread out his spiritual power. This time, the spiritual power suddenly reminded him. Aura, so many auras? How could this be? Could it be that the hellish creatures in the Canyon of Demons escaped? Impossible. Sanaa definitely did not have that kind of strength. Gazing into the distance, Chi Yu did not see the auras that his mental strength had sensed. An ominous premonition filled his heart as he subconsciously lowered his flying speed and slowly approached the source of the aura. At the same time, his spiritual power began to search for Sanaa's aura. As he got closer and closer to the Canyon of Demons, Chi Yu's spiritual power also became more and more sensitive. This was the feeling of dark energy. Ah no. Chi Yu's heart trembled. He stopped flying forward. At the same time, the energy in his body instantly increased. At this time, a cold voice suddenly sounded from all directions. "Are you looking for him?" With a loud bang, a huge body suddenly appeared on the ground. No, it should be said that it was a corpse. Chi Yu's pupils shrank. Sanaa, it was Sanaa. There was no longer any signs of life on Sanaa's body. He was heavily thrown to the ground. All the bones in his body seemed to have been broken. His huge eyes were wide open, filled with the light of unwillingness. A huge pressure, a familiar pressure, appeared again. The ground began to change. One by one, the soldiers of the Burning Legion drilled out from the ground. The dark energy fluctuations were constantly increasing. Lucifer and the three Dreadlords appeared at the same time, surrounding the invisible Chi Yu in the middle. There was a distortion in the air, and Satan's huge figure appeared in front of Chi Yu. Satan held a purple crystal ball in his hand. Layers of strange energy fluctuations came continuously, and the target was the invisible Chi Yu. Chi Yu knew that the invisibility effect was useless. He removed the invisibility effect of Kiran. Facing Satan, he knew that this time, he had lost. Satan obviously knew that he would come to the Canyon of Demons, so he took advantage of the time when he was healing to set up a trap here. Since they were not in the core circle of hell, the hell creatures could fly. At this time, the strong members of the Burning Legion were flapping their wings or using their innate abilities to fly. They formed an iron bucket-like circle, firmly locking him in. Satan looked at Chi Yu mockingly. "Do you think that you still have a chance to escape? Yes, you are very strong. However, Sanaa is also very strong. But he still died in my hands. Humans are indeed despicable. I didn't think that you could even save him. Unfortunately, you still made a mistake. You didn't think that I would be waiting for you here. While waiting for you, I also killed my younger brother, who was the most likely threat to my position. Chi Yu. This time, let's see how you can escape from this trap." Chi Yu floated there without moving. He observed everything around him. Lucifer and the three Dreadlords each guarded a direction. This time, the Burning Legion only sent out flying unit. They had already surrounded him. His position was completely surrounded. Although they were no match for him, if he wanted to escape from here, he had to face their attacks. As long as they could block him for a while, then Satan's attacks would appear. At least on the surface, he had no chance of escaping now. In 2 days, he met Satan again. Chi Yu's situation was completely different. For him, it might be a little dramatic. Last time, he had schemed against Satan. This time, he was schemed against. It could be said that it was a form of retribution. Chi Yu, do you know what your best choice is now? This human that he hated so much was already a turtle in a jar. Satan was not in a hurry to make a move. He only looked at Chi Yu mockingly. Chi Yu shook his head and said, "I don't know. Father-in-law, please teach me." Satan roared angrily. "Don't call me father-in-law. I'm not your father-in-law. Your best choice now is to commit suicide. Otherwise, if you fall into my hands, I'll let you know what it means to truly be unable to live. I can't die even if I want to." Satan's warning to Chi Yu naturally wasn't out of good intentions, even though he was confident that he could kill Chi Yu in this situation. However, Chi Yu's strength was so powerful that even his younger brother, Sanaa, couldn't compare to him. When they destroyed Sanaa, the Burning Legion had already suffered a certain amount of damage. The three Dreadlords were all injured. After the previous battle in the central square of the core circle of hell, the strength of the hell world could be said to be greatly weakened. Satan would rather give up the opportunity to torture Chi-Yu than to lose any more strength in his hands. Shaking his head, Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Perhaps this is the best choice. Unfortunately, this is not the only choice for me. Suicide? That is a sign of cowardice. Even if I die, I will die in battle. Moreover, father-in-law, do you really think that the few of you can stop me from returning home?" Satan snorted coldly and said, "In that case, you still have hope in your heart?" Although Chi-Yu was extremely unwilling, he knew that he could only use his trump card now. Even when he was in a dangerous situation in the central square, he didn't use it. However, in the face of certain death, if he didn't use it now, he might never be able to return to Earth. "Come out, old cow. Your last condition for helping me is to destroy as many hell creatures as possible and cover my return to Earth." Chi-Yu's voice was very calm, just like his aura. He wasn't worried that he would be destroyed by the situation in front of him. Although Satan was strong, could he be stronger than him and Old Cow working together? The energy in the air distorted. Satan was shocked, but Lucifer's expression had already changed. It was obvious that he had already guessed what Chi-Yu wanted to do. A huge body that was 10 meters tall appeared beside Chi-Yu out of thin air. Although their bodies weren't proportionate, the energy ripples brought about by the sudden appearance of this huge body couldn't be compared to anyone else. Even Satan was filled with shock because of his appearance. From a certain perspective, the Bull Demon King's appearance was somewhat similar to Satan. They both had 2 horns on their head. However, Satan's horns were devil's horns, while the Bull Demon King's horns were bull's horns. The Bull Demon King laughed. "What a comfortable feeling! Is this the so-called hell? I couldn't find a chance to come and take a look in the past. This is a very good opportunity." Old Cow was indeed Old Cow. Facing so many enemies, he wasn't afraid at all, just like Chi-Yu. The huge 3-pronged heaven-supporting trident that was forged from the strange metal on the small planet appeared in Old Cow's hands out of thin air. Powerful energy ripples suddenly burst forth. Lucifer said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, he was the one who injured me previously. Be careful, he's very strong. He's even stronger than Chi-Yu." Old Cow laughed mischievously and said, "You forget the pain when the scar is healed. You're all a bunch of birdmen." Old Cow had never acted according to common sense. Before he finished speaking, his huge body had already moved. Satan was shocked to discover that his mind power was actually unable to lock onto Old Cow's body. The 3-pronged heaven-supporting trident moved horizontally and targeted the 3 terror devil kings. Gray energy rippled like waves. It was a viscous energy aura that didn't seem to be restricted by space. In an instant, it engulfed the bodies of the 3 terror devil kings. Old Cow exploded and let out a bull's roar. His body had already charged in Satan's direction. When the 3 terror devil kings were enveloped by Old Cow's gray energy, their bodies actually spasmed. They didn't even dare to resist. They frantically urged their energy to fly away. Lucifer and Satan faced Old Cow at the same time. Old Cow's 3-pronged heaven-supporting trident moved horizontally and stabbed towards Satan's chest. He was about 5 meters shorter than Satan, but his aura wasn't any weaker. While attacking Satan, Old Cow's left hand also slapped towards Lucifer. In the blink of an eye, he had actually attacked the 5 strongest experts in hell. Chi-Yu had already made his move the moment the old bull had started. He was just using Old Cow. Compared to Satan, Chi-Yu was actually more worried about Old Cow. Since Old Cow had already chosen his opponent, he would just let him have them. His figure flashed and Chi-Yu had already arrived at the periphery of the Burning Legion. He started a massacre. There was a loud bang and Satan and Lucifer floated backwards at the same time. Old Cow also tumbled in the air before he stabilized his body. 2 dazzling lights burst out of Old Cow's eyes. Ever since he had been born, he had never met a true opponent. This was the first time these two fellows in front of him had actually worked together to force him to retreat. A black longsword had appeared in Satan's hand. The sword was 8 meters long and there were countless purple patterns carved on it. It was the number 1 demonic weapon in hell. Its name was very simple. It was the same as Satan's title. It was called Demon King. There was a deep mark on the 3-pronged heaven-supporting trident in Old Cow's hand. Although it was made of metal from a small planet, it was still inferior to the number 1 demonic weapon in hell. However, Old Cow wasn't at a disadvantage in terms of energy. Chapter 301. The 3 Terror Demon Kings didn't need Satan's command. They pounced towards Chi-Yu at the same time. They knew that the Burning Legion couldn't stop Chi-Yu. They chose Chi-Yu because they were more afraid of facing the powerful Old Bull. The huge 12 wings spread out again. The purple sun shone in the sky. Satan's dark energy instantly expanded to an unprecedented level under this stimulation. The energy in his body completely exploded. Every beat produced a powerful energy wave. The Bull Demon King's huge eyes revealed a trace of surprise. He raised his head and looked at the purple sun in the sky. He smiled. The strange smile caused the evil aura around his body to suddenly expand. He roared towards the sky. The purple sun that was originally only covering Satan actually split half of its light to cover the Bull Demon King. His already huge body expanded again under the purple sun's light. Evil and tyrannical. That was evil and tyrannical. Even when facing Lucifer and Satan, Old Bull's energy aura actually gained the upper hand. Satan's heart trembled. What kind of power was this? Not only did he and Lucifer not suppress the opponent, but they also increased the opponent's strength. At this moment, there was only one feeling in his heart, and that was fear. As soon as Chi-Yu entered the Burning Legion's camp, he brought about a huge disaster. He was like a huge porcupine. His entire body emitted tyrannical lightning. The Burning Legion was in front of him. They were like paper. Every time he punched, there would be a ball of lightning exploding. Figures flew in the sky, and charred bodies were sent flying. The 3 Terror Demon Kings chased after him. However, Chi-Yu's figure was too strange. He kept flashing and didn't give the 3 Terror Demon Kings any chance to get close. He kept shuttling through the Burning Legion. None of them could withstand his attacks. Facing the strong members of the Burning Legion, they could only be killed. Fear also appeared in Chi-Yu's heart. Old Bull had evolved. This was the only feeling he had. Originally, he wanted to borrow Satan's strength to weaken Old Bull's strength. He even wanted to kill Old Bull here. However, Old Bull's strength had actually increased again. Against the strongest team in hell, he actually didn't show any weakness. Moreover, his own energy had also evolved at this time. Yes. Why didn't he realize that the darkness energy in the infernal realm was also a great tonic for him? It was too late for regrets. Chi-Yu would not regret it either. If it wasn't for the Old Cow, he would be the one facing all the experts in hell. All he could do was kill. The trident in the Old Bull's hand moved again. A tyrannical collision. In the face of Satan's Demon King's sword and Lucifer's strength, the 3 huge figures constantly flickered in the air, and every time they did so, an incomparably tyrannical energy fluctuation would erupt. The more Lucifer and Satan fought, the more shocked they became. Old Ox was also secretly nervous. Although he had the upper hand for now, but, after all, Lucifer and Satan were super powerhouses who had roamed hell for countless years. Under their alliance, even Old Cow would find it extremely difficult to take advantage of them. In particular, the Demon King's sword in Satan's hands had already left one deep mark after another on his heaven-supporting trident. Boom! Lucifer's body was suddenly sent flying by Old Cow. He flew far away like a home run. Meanwhile, Satan also took this opportunity to brazenly attack the trident in Old Cow's hand. The energy of the 2 peerless powerhouses instantly erupted and produced an energy whirlpool. At the same time, he flew back. The trident in Old Cow's hand had already been broken. His eyes revealed a trace of unwillingness as he coldly snorted. "You're the great Demon King? You don't look like much. If it wasn't for the fact that my weapon is inferior to yours, you might not have the upper hand in front of me." As he spoke, Old Cow put away the trident. His huge body, which had already expanded to nearly 20 meters, floated there. He was even more majestic than a mountain. A bloody mark appeared on his chest. However, Old Cow's skin was really tough. Even the Demon King's sword could not penetrate deep into it. Satan did not make a sound. He had to admit that what Old Cow said was the truth. If Old Cow also had a weapon that was similar to the Demon King's sword, even if he and Lucifer worked together, they would not be able to defeat him. Just as Satan was about to follow up with another attack, he suddenly felt his entire body become heavy. It was as if 3 large mountains had suddenly pressed down on him. His body, which was originally in midair, suddenly sank and fell towards the ground in the blink of an eye. Gravity control was one of Old Cow's most proficient abilities. When he used his full strength, Satan, who was caught off guard, could not help but suffer a great loss. Old Cow's huge body moved. Lucifer was sent flying, and Satan suddenly fell rapidly. The opponent in front of him had already completely disappeared. With a powerful bull's roar, a layer of red light burst forth from Old Cow's body. It was a death ray. It suddenly spread out in the shape of a fan. At least a third of the Burning Legion was killed by this unstoppable death ray. A huge gap instantly appeared in the originally firm encirclement. Chi-Yu happened to explode at the same time. The thundercloud force once again displayed the scene of the god of thunder tearing through the sky. With his body as the center, blue light exploded in a distorted manner. Not only did it send the 3 dreadlords flying, but it also destroyed a large number of Burning Legion soldiers. Old Cow shouted, "Chi-Yu, it's time to go." Although he was powerful, he had been injured by Satan in order to severely injure Lucifer. After all, dark energy was not that easy to deal with. Satan's power was not much weaker than his. Hence, Old Cow had used up a large amount of energy in the short fight. After all, this was hell, a place that belonged to Satan. If they continued fighting for a long time, the final outcome would still be him and Chi-Yu being destroyed. His huge body suddenly pounced forward. Gravity control caused the Burning Legion in front of him to fall like meteorites, crashing towards Satan who was pouncing towards him. Chi-Yu and Old Cow charged forward at almost the same time. Their bodies passed by each other. Chi-Yu exploded with the energy of Kirin. Massive energy undulations instantly increased to the limit. The black and silver figures separated at lightning speed. At this moment, Old Cow's body once again exploded with the death ray. The light was completely contained and passed by the black and silver figures. The black and silver figures merged into one again, while Old Cow appeared 100 meters behind Chi-Yu. At the place where they had passed by, the bodies of the 3 dreadlords had completely frozen. Amidst the energy fluctuations, they were like broken porcelain, and fine cracks gradually appeared on their bodies. When Satan rushed over, their bodies shattered. Their bodies just happened to shatter, completely shattering. 3 clouds of blood mist exploded in the air. Chi-Yu let out a long roar. Old Cow's body had already fused back into his body. They faced the powerful enemies one after the other. In addition, Old Cow had used up a lot of his energy. It was the same for Chi-Yu. In particular, when the 2 of them went all out to kill the 3 dreadlords, he even used the doppelganger domain, which consumed the most energy. At this moment, although Satan was the only one left in the enemy's main force, it was time for Chi-Yu and Old Cow to leave. After all, Satan's reinforcements were endless. Meanwhile, Chi-Yu still had to face the surging ball of lightning in midair. Hell was not a place to stay for long. Satan was not easy to deal with either. The 5 elements divine dragon once again took up the heavy responsibility of bringing up the rear. Satan did not chase after them. He floated in midair, and his eyes were filled with confusion. He never expected that his meticulously planned attack would end in such a manner. Chi Yu's body was in the midst of the rumbling thunder. He had already been thrown into the sky above the Valley of Demons and was engulfed by the ball of lightning that suddenly appeared. Lucifer returned to Satan's side. When he saw Satan's demon king sword annihilating the 5 elements divine dragons, his eyes flickered with astonishment. Old Bull's home run just now had already injured his foundation. It would definitely take more than a day or two for him to recover. "Your Majesty," Lucifer said with difficulty. Satan raised his hand. "You don't have to say anything else. It seems like our power is indeed insufficient to conquer the earth. When we return, immediately contact the Netherworld King Hades. I agree to cooperate with him. I am willing to become the master of the earth together with him." Satan was probably the only one who could remain calm in such a situation. The death of the 3 dreadlords had greatly agitated the king of hell. Old Cow's valiance had filled him with a sense of crisis. That was an existence that was above him. However, the energy on this monster's body was even more evil than his. What kind of creature was he exactly? Why was he together with Chi Yu? Satan kept thinking about it. Although he had suffered great losses this time, it also allowed him to clearly see what the strongest power on earth was. He started to plan in his heart. After all, this was hell. Everything could still be salvaged. If he had suffered such a crushing defeat on earth, it would probably be impossible for him to retreat. Perhaps he was consoling himself. However, at least at this moment, the anger in Satan's heart had disappeared. As he looked at the ball of lightning that was getting stronger, he actually prayed for the first time in his life. He prayed that Chi Yu would truly be engulfed by the ball of lightning, even though he knew that this situation was almost impossible. Otherwise, Chi Yu would not have rashly entered the lightning. Ling'er silently appeared beside Satan. She was holding her devil's kiss in her hand. She had seen everything that had just happened. When Chi Yu was intercepted, she had already arrived at the right time. As the princess of hell, when there was no Lucifer guarding her, who could stop this daughter of Satan? She originally wanted to save Chi Yu. She was even willing to use her own life to threaten her father to let Chi Yu go. However, she had witnessed such a scene. She was shocked, absolutely shocked. "Father, it's all my fault. I brought disaster to hell." The devil's kiss in Ling'er's hand shone with a cold light. She quietly placed it on her neck. She knew that it was impossible for her and Chi Yu to be together. Chi Yu had brought such a disaster to earth. How could her father allow him to be with her? Moreover, he already had so many female confidants, so the two of them could only be husband and wife for one night. Ling'er's heart was filled with despair. Satan turned around and looked at Ling'er calmly. He said in a low voice, "Girl, what are you doing?" Tears flowed down Ling'er's cheeks as she spoke in a mournful voice. "Father, hell has suffered such a great loss this time. Someone must stand up and bear the responsibility. Although I am your daughter, for the sake of hell's future, I am willing to bear everything. I will use my life and blood to wash away the humiliation you have suffered." Looking at Ling'er, Satan's calm gaze gradually became gentler. After all, this was his only daughter. Satan was already dead. He had personally killed him. If he had not used up some energy to kill Satan, perhaps the situation would have been different. Everything had already happened. As the Lord of Hell, he could only face it calmly in order to wash away the humiliation in the next battle. He could not sacrifice his daughter's life. Ling'er's body instantly froze. She was surrounded by a huge amount of dark energy. Satan waved his hand and the devil's kiss was already in his hand. He said angrily, "Nonsense. Only I can wash away the humiliation I have suffered. It has nothing to do with you. I've already lost my loyal subordinates and rebellious brothers. Do you want me to lose my only daughter as well?" At the end of his words, Satan's eyes shone with the light of a loving father. The restraints on Lingaire's body disappeared. Her tears flowed even more violently. She let out a cry and threw herself into her father's cold embrace. It was as if she wanted to vent all the pain in her heart through her tears. Satan gently stroked Lingaire's beautiful long hair. The light in his eyes became even gentler. "All right, it's all in the past. Don't cry. Don't worry, that human kid won't die. Otherwise, why would he dare to rush into the range of the lightning ball? Actually, from a certain point of view, your foresight is much better than mine. It is because of his appearance that I know that humans can reach such a powerful level. However, the next time we meet, there must be a resolution between him and me. Don't cry. You are my daughter, Satan. You must be strong. Now that the 3 Dreadlords are dead and the Burning Legion has suffered a certain amount of damage, you must be strong. When I lead the Burning Legion's infernal army to sweep across the human world, you and Lucifer will be my most capable helpers." Chiyu really wouldn't die. He knew that from the moment he rushed into the range of the lightning ball. In order to conserve energy, Chiyu directly used the undying domain. As the saying goes, walking among thousands of flowers, not a single one will touch you. No matter how ferocious the lightning ball's attack was, it couldn't do anything to the undying domain. Seeing the surging thunder attribute energy explode on his body without causing him any harm, Chiyu couldn't help but deepen his understanding of the Kongtong seal. As expected of one of the 10 great divine weapons. With it, his strength had imperceptibly increased by a large chunk, and his chances of survival had also increased. If only the Xianyuan sword was still by his side. In that case, with the situation just now where they were evenly matched, maybe he and the Bull Demon King could join forces and kill Satan. A peerless divine weapon could often become the key to the entire battle. His body shot straight up into the air. The thundercloud force was the best way to increase his speed. Chiyu's body continued to rise in the illusory air, rising into the sky. Although the undying domain consumed a lot of his energy, it was also because of the undying domain that he could fly under the enormous pressure of the overwhelming righteousness of heaven and earth. When Chiyu's energy had dropped to a dangerous level, his body suddenly became light, and the energy of the lightning ball's bombardment disappeared at the same time. Heaving a huge sigh of relief, Chiyu knew that he had left the range of the lightning ball. The energy in his body revolved. He dared not waste even a second, and once again increased his speed, using the last of his energy to shoot his body into the sky. The surrounding purple sky began to distort, causing Chiyu to see a giant circular ring. It was impossible to determine the diameter of the giant ring, but by the time Chiyu discovered its existence, the surrounding space had already been completely distorted. Then, a strong suction suddenly appeared, wrapped around his body, and directly drilled into an unknown world. At this time, Chiyu's energy was finally exhausted, and the distorted energy around him was much stronger than what he experienced when he came to the Hell world. However, before Chiyu could feel any discomfort, the Bull Demon King's domineering evil aura had automatically spread, enveloping Chiyu's body, and completely blocking the distorted energy outside. Life and death domain. Chiyu's life was equivalent to the Bull Demon King's. How could he not protect him? Chiyu. Old Bull's deep voice rang in Chiyu's spiritual world. "I know," Chiyu replied calmly. At this moment, he was not overly excited because he could escape from the Hell world. Instead, his heart was slightly heavy. The Bull Demon King said indifferently, "It's good that you know. When you return, your body will recover. It's time for you to fulfill your promise to me. If I can find Chiyu, you don't have to do anything, I will kill him. When that time comes, I can even do one more thing for you, and it will not be in vain that we are fated to be together." Chiyu's heart moved and he thought of something. However, he knew that even if his judgment was correct, he would not be able to stop it. However, he knew that even if his judgment was correct, he would not be able to stop it from happening. Currently, the relationship between him and Old Bull was in a delicate state. Old Bull was restricted by the life and death domain. However, once Old Bull exploded without caring about anything, it was very likely that he would kill his companions. That was an outcome that Chi-Yu could not accept. No matter if it was him or Old Bull, they were already very familiar with each other after spending so much time together. Old Bull naturally knew his weakness. He also knew that unless it was a last resort, Old Bull would definitely not choose to do that. Old Cow had already fulfilled his promise to him, so he had no choice but to fulfill his promise to Old Cow. As the saying went, the calm before the storm. Everything did not end with Chi-Yu's departure from the Hell World. Instead, it was just the beginning. Dragonfield Courtyard. Ryue threw the phone in her hand onto the sofa angrily and muttered to herself, "This bastard. I still can't contact him. He said he would be back in 10 days. However, half a month has passed. There is no news at all. Doesn't he know that everyone is worried about him? That's right. When he comes back this time, we definitely cannot let him off easily." Ming Ming clenched her fist and gestured angrily. Shang Bing giggled and said, "Forget it. It's all bark and no bite. When he really comes back, I'm afraid that you will forget everything and directly jump into his embrace." Ru Yu and Ming Ming looked at each other and blushed at the same time. Snow Girl stood beside Ryue and gently squeezed Ryue's shoulder. She smiled and said, "Actually, you should understand him. He has too many burdens on his shoulders. Ever since he possessed great power, when had he ever had a day of peace and stability? He is already tired. I think that if he was not held back by something, he would have returned long ago." Ming Ming smiled and said, "Snow Girl is still soft-hearted. I really don't know if I should call you Snow Girl or Fire Girl." Snow Girl blushed and said, "Ming Ming, you are making fun of me. When Chi-Yu comes back, I will complain to him. If I am not wrong, you still seem to be a virgin. Why don't we let Chi-Yu?" "Ah, you stupid girl, how can you say such words? See if I can let you go." Ming Ming's figure flashed, and she had already pounced on Snow Girl. Snow Girl fluttered and dodged while laughing. Her movements were extremely fast. Even if Ming Ming's strength was above hers, it was still very difficult to catch her. Ryue looked at them helplessly and shook her head subconsciously. She said, "All right, stop fooling around. Snow Girl, how is the situation with Kirin Group?" Snow Girl grabbed Ming Ming's hands and said, "There is no problem with the group. Although Chi-Yu did not come back, we have gone to the ancient behemoth period twice and brought back a large number of fruit. Now the group's business is completely on the right track and has entered the international market. According to Chi-Yu's original idea, we set a super high price for Kirin Group's products in the international market. However, there are really a lot of rich people in foreign countries. Even with such high prices, there is often a shortage of goods. Now the company's capital chain is fully operational. Uncle Chi sent someone to join our group. He's an expert in financial management. Now, he's a financial expert. Now the company's rich funds have been invested in the capital market. The qualifications of the entire group have formed a virtuous cycle. When Chi-Yu comes back, I will ask him if we are listed. If we are listed, I am afraid the total value of our company's assets can develop to the scale of nearly $5 billion. Ryue exclaimed, "It has developed to this extent? No wonder monopolies are always the most profitable. Snow Girl, it has been hard on you." Snow Girl giggled and said, "It's not hard at all. Anyway, Kirin Group belongs to all of us. Sister Ryue, why don't you hand over the company to Brother Ming Xiao and come over to help? I will give you the position of general manager. With you, the company will definitely develop faster and better." Ryue smiled bitterly and shook her head. She said, "If I run away, Brother will tear me apart. If he goes to Mom and Dad and cries, I will be in big trouble. You and Sister Yueguan are enough for Kirin Group. Anyway, we have money now. You can also recruit more elites to join the group." "Oh right. Last time you went back to the ancient behemoth period, did you bring Miss Xiaolu back? Chiyu is really too much. He sent her there and didn't care. I'm afraid Brother Hummer will complain to us later. Snow Girl shook her head with a smile and said, Don't worry, Sister Ryue. Brother Hummer won't complain. Last time he went with me to the ancient behemoth period. It's not that we don't want to bring Miss Xiaolu back, but she didn't intend to come back at all. She has fallen in love with the environment there, and said that only the life there is the most suitable for her. Everything is so comfortable and peaceful. That kind of environment has already conquered her heart. She said she will stay for a while. She will come back when the company is ready to shoot the next season's advertisement. Ryue said, That's good. There is no problem with the group. Everything will be much easier. Ming Ming turned around and came behind Snow Girl. She put her hands around Snow Girl's waist and leaned on her with a smile. How can there be a problem with the group? This time we helped the world solve the problem of the asteroid. Although under Chi Yu's proposal, the country did not announce our identity. But now the country is sparing no effort in supporting our group. What's more, we earn more money from foreigners. Sister Ryue, I don't want to go to school anymore. How about I join Kirin Group? Snow Girl, how about I be your secretary? Snow Girl giggled and said, No. You'd better wait to be Chi Yu's secretary. If that's the case, his boss who is absent from work every day might get a perfect attendance award. You're making fun of me. Ming Ming lightly scratched Snow Girl's waist, causing Snow Girl to let out a string of bell-like laughter. Seeing them laughing and joking around, Ryue couldn't help but feel a lot less worried. Although they only had one lover, perhaps because they had experienced life and death together, there was no estrangement between them. The Dragon Realm courtyard had become their common home. They also had a tacit understanding and never mentioned marrying Chi Yu. They were happy and harmonious with each other. If it weren't for the shadow of Chi Yu's absence, they would probably be happier. Ming Ming was right. Since returning from the last mission, whether it was Ryue's Dragon Field Group or Chi Yu's Kirin Group, they had all been taken care of by the country. Privately, comprehensive tax exemption had brought huge benefits to the two groups. Everyone who participated in that mission received the country's Bauhinia medal, and the 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors, led by Ryue, received the same Diamond Guardian medal treatment as Chi Yu. Ming Ming felt that it was useless, so she gave her Diamond Guardian medal to Snow Girl. The leaders of the two major groups had such items on them. At the very least, any problem at the national level could be easily solved. It was difficult for the group not to develop smoothly. The Zodiac Guardian warriors all went back to rest. They really needed some time to adjust. The training during the ancient behemoth period, coupled with the near-death experience during the asteroid mission, everyone had different degrees of mental fatigue. After all, everyone should have their own lives. Now, in the Dragon Field courtyard, there were only a few girls and the pig Zodiac warrior, Guanjing, who was too lazy to go home. Everyone else had gone home to rest. Even the 12 Zodiac warriors were temporarily dismissed by Ryue to go back to cultivate. Now, the Dragon Field courtyard had removed all the security systems. The reason was very simple. In the spacious courtyard outside the Dragon Field courtyard, a big golden bird was lazily basking in the sun every day. With it around, anyone who dared to come to the Dragon Field courtyard would probably not even be left with dregs. Originally, Snow Girl wanted to bring Little Pung back when they went back to the ancient behemoth period, but Little Pung stubbornly chose not to go home. He didn't say the reason, but in fact there was only one reason why he chose to stay, and that was because of Chi Yu. The agreement between the two of them was nothing. However, through his contact with Chi Yu, Little Pung encountered many things that he had never encountered before. He never thought that when a person's life was in danger, he would not forget to help others escape from danger, and that such a situation would happen to him. At the last moment, in order not to implicate him, Chi Yu even distracted himself by canceling the contract between them and did not let his companions help him. Although Chi Yu did all of this subconsciously, his behavior had deeply shocked Little Peng. Although Little Peng was a dire beasts also had feelings. Chi Yu had truly obtained his approval. Of course, there was another reason why Little Peng didn't leave. After all, in this human world, there were still more than 100 of his clansmen. As the son of the great Peng Wisdom King, he had to be responsible for his clansmen. Even if he wanted to go back, it was definitely not now. Therefore, Little Peng stayed. On the surface, he was abiding by his promise with Chi Yu, but now Little Peng truly admitted that he was Chi Yu's order, even if Chi Yu wasn't there. Chapter 302. Snow Girl smiled. Sister Ryue, why don't we go out for a walk? It's not good to be cooped up in the courtyard every day. Don't you find it annoying to go home and train apart from work? Ryue smiled. That doesn't sound like something you would say. You used to be even more reluctant to leave the house than me. Snow Girl sighed. I don't know why either. Maybe it's because Chi Yu changed my personality. How about it, sisters? Are you interested in going out for a walk? Shang Bing shook her head and laughed. I'm not going. I definitely won't go. Going out with you guys makes me feel inferior. Besides, don't you think that if we appear in the same place at the same time, it will inevitably cause unnecessary impulses? I remember there were a few talent scouts looking for you on the street, Snow Girl. Indeed, with their looks and figures, even one of them walking on the street would become the focus of attention. If so many of them appeared at the same time, who knew what kind of commotion it would cause? At this moment, the phone rang. Ryue grabbed the phone almost immediately. On the surface, she was angry that Chi Yu didn't return on time, but in fact, she was more anxious than anyone else. Ignoring the mocking gazes of her sisters, Ryue answered the call and asked, "Who is it?" Her somewhat expectant expression quickly returned to normal. "Christy, it's you. How are you?" "Chi Yu?" "Chi Yu hasn't returned yet. I think he'll be back soon. When he returns, I'll ask him to call you." "Alright. That's all for now." After hanging up the phone, Ryue couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. She had returned to England and brought her parents back to England according to the method Chi Yu taught her. With the cooperation between Chi Yu and the Dark Parliament, her strength had reached the level of the chairman of the Dark Parliament. In addition, her own strength had already reached the level of the chairman of the Dark Council. Now, in the Dark Council, her position was absolutely transcendent. The vampire race had gradually become an indispensable and powerful force in the Dark Parliament. After all, the last time she used the primordial blood, she created a huge batch of experts. Just now, someone said that he wanted to do something to Chi Yu, but then the phone rang. Even his soul was hooked away. Haha. Shang Bing let out a long laugh and did not wait for Ryue to react. He turned around and ran outside. She, who often exercised, would feel uncomfortable if she didn't move her body every day. Ryue didn't chase after Shang Bing. She let her float to the gate and rush out. "Ah!" Shang Bing exclaimed. Then, her voice was cut off. Although they quarreled, the 5 women had already formed a deep friendship. Ming Ming, Ryue, Snow Girl, and the Plant Soul. Almost at the same time, he rushed out and was the first to reach the door. It was a Plant Soul that rarely spoke. However, they were immediately stunned because Shang Bing's voice was cut off in front of them. As soon as Shang Bing stepped out of the door, she immediately bumped into a tall figure. Fortunately, she reacted quickly and used her body to support the other party. However, at the next moment, her slender and delicate body was already tightly embraced by the other party. "It's him. He's back." Chi Yu smiled at the 5 women in front of him. "Hi, I'm back. Why were you all immobilized?" He looked much more mature than when he was on the asteroid mission. He was still dressed in black, but his hair had become crystal silver. He was tall and had a familiar aura. That's right, their man was back. You still know how to come back. Apart from Shangbing, who was in Qi Yu's arms, the 4 women, including the plant soul, shouted in unison. Qi Yu was shocked. Before he could react, the 4 women had pounced on him. They used all sorts of tricks at the same time. Qi Yu faced them head-on and was instantly attacked indiscriminately. "No, spare me!" he screamed. Before he could enter the door, Qi Yu was thrown out by the 4 women. Qi Yu looked at the 5 women standing in front of the door. Shangbing had also escaped from Qi Yu's embrace when he was thrown out. They were like the 5 tigers. Ryue stood in the middle. They all glared at him fiercely. No matter how powerful Qi Yu was, he could not help but feel uneasy at this moment. He asked tentatively, "Is there a coup in the family?" The 5 women looked at him, and their expressions suddenly became strange. Qi Yu looked really disheveled. There were footprints all over his body. His hair was also messy. Even a few buttons on his shirt had fallen off. The funniest thing was that the zipper on his pants had been pulled open, revealing the black underwear inside. But he did not realize it himself. Ha 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 ha. Almost at the same time, the 5 women burst into laughter. Looking at Qi Yu, they laughed so hard that they could not straighten their back. Qi Yu was stunned for a moment. When he lowered his head to look, he discovered the miserable state of his body and hurriedly began to tidy himself up. However, he was only halfway through his actions when he subconsciously stopped. He had already seen that although the 5 girls were smiling, tears were already flowing down their faces. This separation was different from the previous ones. It could be said that it was a true separation of life and death. After Qi Yu used the Big Dipper technique to cause the asteroid to deviate and disappear, everyone thought that he was dead. Even the 5 women were just lying to themselves. In less than a month, the 5 women did not know how many times they had been tortured in their hearts. Now, he was finally back. He was alive. Tears of joy mixed with tears. What kind of feeling was that? "I'm sorry." Qi Yu slowly walked to the side of the 5 women and opened his broad arms. However, he found that his arms were still a little short. It was impossible for him to hold all 5 women in his arms. For a moment, he stood there in a daze, looking at this and that, not knowing what to say. "Today, your punishment is to sleep on the lawn." Ryue was the first to speak. Qi Yu smiled bitterly and nodded. "Fine, fine. I admit it. I deserve to be punished, I deserve to be punished." Ryue snorted. "Then do you know why we punished you?" Qi Yu was stunned. "It's because I went on an adventure, right?" Ryue shook her head. "No, it's because you went on an adventure without us. If you had let us go with you at that time, why would we be so worried? How could you abandon us at that time? Did you think that we were afraid of death? That you were the only hero?" Qi Yu was speechless by Ryue's words. Yako was speechless, but a smile appeared on his face again. Although he didn't say anything. However, if he had to choose again, he would do the same. Even if the result was death, it would not change. Snow Girl stuck out her tongue at Qi Yu. The plant soul, on the other hand, showed a helpless expression on its face. Shangbing looked at Qi Yu fiercely, but there was gentleness in the fierceness. As for Ryue and Mingming, although their faces were solemn, their hearts had already softened. "I accept the punishment. Then I will wait for you to forgive me on the lawn." Qi Yu smiled and took a few steps back. He walked to Little Peng's side. Little Peng's big head came over and gently rubbed Qi Yu's body a few times. His big eyes were full of smiles. Although he didn't say anything, but the excitement emanating from his body had explained everything. Master was back. His master was finally back. Of course, when the master and the mistress had a conflict, Little Peng wisely chose not to participate. He quietly raised his right wing and covered his eyes, as if to tell Qi Yu, "I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything." With his huge body making such an action, it was as comical as it could be. Qi Yu shook his head helplessly. "It's over, I can only fight alone." However, his ears pricked up, looking at Ryue and the others, and eavesdropping on their conversation. Ming Ming leaned against Ryue's ear and whispered, "Sister Ryue, are you really going to punish him? He looks quite pitiful. It wasn't easy for him to come back. He must be very tired." Ryue hesitated and said, "But, if we forgive him so easily this time, won't he do it again next time? Don't worry, with his body, he won't be tired. This time, we must make him remember." Shang Bing giggled and said, "As long as you can bear it, I have no problem." The plant soul did not establish any relationship with Chiyu. In her own opinion, her position was the lowest. Although she was anxious, she did not dare to say anything, afraid that it would cause the four girls to misunderstand. Snow Girl had always been obedient. Looking at Ryue, although she did not say anything, her eyes were already filled with anxiety. Just as they were hesitating, Chiyu took out his phone from somewhere and placed it by his ear. He put on an act and said, "Dad, is that you?" "Yes, I'm back." Okay, I'll go over to eat now. I miss you, Mom and Sister too. And I'll be there right away." As he spoke, he hung up the phone, turned around and patted little Peng's head and said, "Brother, do you want to continue basking in the sun here, or do you want to go eat a big meal with me?" Little Peng hurriedly lifted the wings that covered his eyes. I want to eat a big meal." "You're not allowed to go." Ryue and the other girls were anxious. In just an instant they surrounded Chiyu. He had finally come back, and now he had to leave again. Although he was going to his parents' place, if something happened on the way and he sneaked away again, how could they catch him? Chiyu found it funny, but on the surface, he did not show it. He said with grievance, "I haven't eaten for more than half a month. You can't let me eat grass on the lawn, right? Can't I go to Mom and Dad's place for a free meal?" Hearing that Chiyu had not eaten for more than half a month, the last line of defense of the five girls finally collapsed. In front of a ruffian like Chiyu, their attack was really too weak. Ryue snorted and got close to Chiyu. She pinched his waist with her right hand without hiding it. "Take us with you, no one can be missing. From now on, your punishment will change. You have to be under our supervision at all times." Chiyu laughed and carried Ryue up. "Okay, no problem. It's just supervision. Okay. Then you guys can supervise me together tonight." Once he said that, the plant soul was the first to run away. However, just as she turned to run, she was pulled back by Shang Bing. She could only hide beside Shang Bing with a blushing face. Little Peng returned to the Kongtong seal at the right time. The familiar feeling of energy made him feel so comfortable that he almost moaned. Looking at the five girls in front of him, Chiyu comforted them one after another. After a long period of comforting, they finally stopped crying and smiled. "Tell me what happened that day. Tell me the truth, otherwise I won't let you go to bed tonight." Ming Ming stared fiercely at Chiyu and said. However, as soon as she said that, she realized that she had said something wrong. Sure enough, Chiyu smiled wickedly. "So, if I tell you the truth, I can go to bed with you tonight? You're so annoying. In your dreams." Ming Ming glanced at the girls who were watching the show, but she did not show any weakness and puffed out her chest. Chiyu said, "This time, I've really taken a trip to hell. I had a fight with Satan, and it ended in a draw. Then I came back to pull it off." The five girls were still waiting for him to continue, but after waiting for a long time, they saw that Chiyu had no intention of continuing. "That's it?" Ryue asked. From what they heard, when Chiyu said that he went to hell, he was referring to the asteroid incident. However, they did not know that he really went to hell and really fought with Satan. Chiyu shrugged and said, "That's not enough." Ryue snorted and said, "Of course not. Tell me the details. We want to know what you were doing when you were missing for so many days. Did you meet a beautiful woman and forget about your duties?" Chiyu smiled bitterly and said, "I'm innocent. My wives. Am I that kind of person?" "Yes, tell me." Okay, I'll tell you, I'll be honest." Chi-Yu then told them how he survived on the asteroid and how he returned to Earth with the help of the Bull Demon King. Then, how he was brought to Hell by Ling-Er, and what happened in Hell in detail. Of course, he said that he and Ling-Er's one-night stand was to thank the Covenant of Darkness for their help. After listening to Chi-Yu, the 5 girls could not help but feel a thrill. However, when Ryua saw that Chi-Yu's eyes were flickering, she could not help but ask, "You're not lying to us? When you called us, if you didn't know that you were going to Hell, why did you tell us that you would be back in 10 days? Chi-Yu, at that time, my strength had not fully recovered. My body was also very weak. And it was far from here. At that time, I was in a sorry state. I didn't even have money to buy food. Fortunately, I met Shueiwe. With her help, I was able to come back. Later, I thought that France was quite close to Germany anyway, so I might as well go to the Covenant of Darkness to thank them. That's why what happened after that happened. Originally, I wanted to come back in advance to give you a surprise. Who knew that I would go to Hell?" The fierceness in Ming Ming's eyes had long turned into gentleness. She asked with concern, "Satan didn't do anything to you, right? How is your body now? You haven't eaten for so many days, can you still hold on?" Hitting the snake with the stick had always been one of the best tricks of a ruffian. Chi-Yu had been a ruffian for many years, so he naturally knew how to do it. Before Ming Ming finished speaking, his body immediately swayed, and his feet became a lot weaker. His originally normal face was skillfully controlled by him to become a little pale. On the surface, he reluctantly said, "It's nothing. I won't die even if I starve for more than 10 days. Ming Ming was shocked by Chi-Yu's sudden change. She quickly went forward to support him and transferred her energy into his body. She hurriedly said, "Sister Ryua, forget it. Let's not interrogate him for now. Let him quickly go back to his room to rest. We can talk about everything later, okay?" Chi-Yu's tricks could only fool the 3 pure girls like Ming Ming, the Plant Soul, and Snow Girl. Shang Bing and Ryua immediately saw the flaw in it, but seeing the pleading looks of Ming Ming and the other 2, they simply went along with it. Ryua nodded and went forward to support Chi-Yu's other arm. She said, "Then let's go back to our room first." As she said that, she forcefully pinched Chi-Yu's fleshy area, causing Chi-Yu to grimace in pain. It felt so good to be home. As soon as they entered the living room, Chi-Yu fell comfortably on the sofa. As long as they entered the door, everything would be much easier to talk about. Of course, he also understood that the 5 girls could not really blame him. It was just because of the fear of being separated by death that they had to vent. Ming Ming looked at Chi-Yu's comfortable appearance. Only then did she realize that she had been tricked. Chi-Yu hurriedly said, "Don't hit me. We can talk about it. Don't be so violent, okay? I really haven't eaten for more than 10 days. I'm really weak, but I can still hold on." Ryua said in annoyance, "Were you pretending on the phone just now?" Chi-Yu did not answer and only chuckled. The 5 girls looked at each other and shouted, "Beat him up!" With a loud shout, "Beat him up!" 5 graceful bodies pounced on Chi-Yu almost at the same time. Screams continuously came out from the dragon-field courtyard. Chi-Yu really wanted to shout, "I'm so pitiful!" However, he already felt a little overwhelmed when he used his breast-grabbing dragon claw at this time. There was not a single cloud in the dark blue sky. The warm sunlight shone on the earth, and the clear light seemed to be no longer affected by pollution. It was already spring. Under the warm sunlight, everything on the earth gradually recovered, and spring could be seen everywhere. The gate of the dragon field courtyard opened, and a long Cadillac limousine drove out from inside. The black car exuded a noble and elegant temperament under the sunlight, just like a gentleman, quietly walking out of the dragon field. It headed in the direction of the airport road. After 2 hours of torture, Chi-Yu finally obtained the forgiveness of the 5 girls. However, his body was already riddled with wounds. In fact, the torture should have ended in an hour. However, just as the torture ended, The 5 girls who stopped to catch their breath were surprised to find that there were 5 special things in Chi-Yu's hands. And those things seemed to be the special things that were used to bind their breasts. The torture time instantly doubled. Chi-Yu's screams also became more mournful. "Why are you all so far away from me? Haven't I already obtained your forgiveness?" Chi-Yu looked at the 5 girls sitting together and asked carefully. "You have forgiven me for what happened last time. But what about what you did just now? You pervert," Ming Ming said angrily and embarrassedly. In front of Chi-Yu's breast-grabbing hand, Ryue and Snow Girl were a bit better. After all, they had already had intimate relations with Chi-Yu. And Shang Bing's ability to accept has always been very strong, so she did not have much of a reaction. However, Ming Ming and the Plant Soul girls were extremely embarrassed. After all, not only were they virgins, but they also had too little contact with the affairs between men and women. Although Chi-Yu's big hands that were full of electricity gave them a feeling they had never felt before, it also brought them endless embarrassment. Chi-Yu said calmly, "How do you know my nickname?" Shang Bing pretended to be surprised. "Oh? Your nickname is Pervert. Good. I'll have to ask Uncle and Auntie later if they gave you this name." There's no need." Chi-Yu was immediately convinced. After finally coming back and being tortured, Chi-Yu decided to make it real. After all, he had been away for so long, and he had a strong longing for his parents. If it wasn't for the fact that Dragonfield Courtyard was already his home in his heart, and that Ryue and the others who knew the truth would be too worried, he would have definitely gone to see his parents first. Filial piety was the most important of all virtues. After experiencing the happiness of being an orphan and having parents now, Chi-Yu especially cherished this familial love. The 5 girls were all good and understanding girls. When Chi-Yu mentioned that he wanted to see his parents, they naturally would not object. Of course, there was only one condition, and that was that he had to bring every single one of them. Even the shy Plant Soul mustered up the courage to follow this time. This could be considered as Chi-Yu officially bringing them to see his parents. If they backed out now, they might not have another chance in the future. Of course, the Plant Soul understood this. Chi-Yu's clothes were tidy again. His hair had also been combed neatly by Ryue. Silver hair and black clothes. Although he wasn't very handsome, his special aura was incomparable. Only in front of his lover and family would the king of the Zodiac act so amiable and approachable. If it was someone else, who knew what would happen? Of course. Under his black clothes, there were many bruises on his skin. They were all the work of his lovers and babies. Chi-Yu, do you want to inform everyone that you're back safely? They are also very worried about your situation. After making a fuss, as the eldest sister, Ryue was the first to recover her wisdom. Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Go ahead." "Right, why was that brat Guanjing still sleeping? Is he like this every day? It's not a problem for you to inform everyone that I'm back. But, just inform the Zodiac Guardian Warriors. That'll do. Don't inform the Zodiac Squad for now. I don't want the 4 major families to know. It's not easy for me to come back. This time, I want to have some peace and quiet. In the past, even when I had peace and quiet, I would still train hard. This time, I can finally relax. I can also spend time with all of you. Although you're all my confidants, I've never taken on the responsibility of being your boyfriend." The 5 girls rolled their eyes at Chi-Yu as if saying, "It's good that you know." Ryue said, "Guanjing seems to have been stimulated by you in space. After coming back, he has been training hard. He doesn't even go home. Although he's lazy, he's still a good person. I believe that after this period of training, he will definitely give us a surprise. I believe that after this period of training, he will definitely give us a surprise." Chi-Yu nodded his head. Only by continuously working hard can one's strength rise to the next level. This trip to hell had allowed me to see many of our flaws. Firstly, and this is also the most serious point, we simply have too few people. we can't compare to the armies of other planes. For example, the Burning Legion in Hell has at least 100,000 people. They're so powerful that no country in this world can compete with them. Ryua frowned and said, "Can't we rely on our technology?" Chiyu shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "You should be very clear about our own strength. The entire Burning Legion can be said to be a super combination of psychic. Their defense is not something that ordinary weapons can break. Even weapons of mass destruction, such as missiles, are very difficult to fight against the Burning Legion. The only thing that can really hurt them is the ultimate weapon of mankind, nuclear weapons. However, as the saying goes, injuring 1,000 enemies, injuring 800. Not to mention that the number of nuclear bombs on Earth has been reduced to a historical low due to the asteroid. Even if there were enough nuclear bombs, it wouldn't be easy to destroy the Burning Legion. Moreover, once the nuclear bombs are used, the damage to Earth will be unimaginable. You don't want to see Earth become a living hell with radiation. Therefore, if we want to stop the Burning Legion's advance, we have to rely on strong individual combat ability. Looking at the current situation, the only place that can be used is the Mech Legion of the United States. But how many of them are there? There are only a little more than 1,000, and a large part of them was destroyed by the asteroid. Their combat ability is far from enough. If I were Satan, once I invade Earth, I would spread out my main force and start a large-scale invasion with thousands or tens of thousands of people. At the same time, I would start a war with many countries. At that time, what they will bring will be endless slaughter, causing a huge disaster to the whole world. What should we do? Therefore, we will become the main force to snipe them. However, in the Hell Legion, other than Satan and Lucifer, although there are no enemies in my eyes, how can our Zodiac warriors compare to the number of 100,000? The absolute disadvantage in numbers will make it very difficult for us to fight. We can only gradually weaken the strength of the Burning Legion in the form of guerrilla warfare. In the process, Earth will be baptized by the enemy. We can't even estimate how much damage we will suffer. Ryua's eyes flickered. Do you have any good suggestions? What can we do to fight against the infernal realm? Chiyu thought about it and said, if we want to compete with them, we need to improve our strength first. Although we only have a little more than 100 people, these 100 people are like a sharp knife that the opponent can't resist. They are a constant threat to the entire Burning Hell Legion. Then, we need to find a way to lure them to a place where there is no one and fight them to the death. Only in this way can we win against the opponent and minimize the losses of humans. Ryu nodded and said, it seems that it is not impossible to achieve. Through the attack on the asteroids, it can be seen that whether it is the Greek Guardians or the Pope, they can still stand on the right side when it comes to big issues. Coupled with our strength, we should be able to stop Satan. Chiyu said, it will be very difficult. First of all, Yumu and her Greek Guardians are facing the same problem as us, which is numbers. Although their strength is not bad, their numbers are too few. You must know that the entire Burning Legion can use powerful dark energy. It is easier said than done to fight against them. As for the Holy See, they are not bad. They have a lot of believers. They are also good at fighting against the Hell World's best light power. However, we don't know how much strength the Holy See has now. The number of people that can really be used is probably not many. After all, although the Holy See has developed for many years, the various countries will not allow it to have too strong an armed force. This greatly restricts the Holy See's strength. Moreover, what I am most worried about is that even if the Burning Hell Legion is stopped by us. However, Grandmaster once said that Earth's crisis comes wave after wave. When that unknown day comes, the entrance to Earth from the various evil planes will open. Will it only be the Hell side that invades Earth? Satan's younger brother, Sanaa, once said that the most likely thing to appear at the same time as Satan is the power of the underworld. The ruler there is Hades in Greek mythology. He rebelled from the Greek gods. His strength is tyrannical, and he has many subordinates, even comparable to hell. If Satan has the assistance of Hades, we will be even more strained." The women all gasped, their eyes revealing a thoughtful light. Chi Yu continued, "This world is balanced. Judging from the current situation on Earth, ability users are mainly divided into three major forces. One is the Holy See, there is no doubt about that. The other is the Greek Guardians led by Yum. From the information I have received, they will be fighting against Hell and the Underworld respectively. However, don't forget that on Earth, we are also a strong force among ability users. Moreover, judging from the current situation, we are even the strongest, representing the entire East. There are dark forces in the West. Don't tell me there are no dark forces in the East? This is very difficult to determine. Once a strong dark force appears on our side, I am afraid that we will not be able to help the Holy See and the Greek Guardians. In that case, we might not even be able to take care of ourselves. How are we going to help the Vatican and the Greek Guardians? The real disaster on Earth will also appear at that time. Although this is only my guess, this situation is very likely to happen.